Well, good evening, members, officers, visitors, and members of the public. We seem to have a bit of feedback. Somebody's mic open. Apologies, we've just got a small technical issue. Okay, we'll commence again. So good evening, members, officers, visitors, and members of the public. I'm Councillor Tim Gibson, and I'll be chairing this evening's meeting. The meeting will be recorded and proceedings will be conducted in accordance with the Council's constitution, including procedural rules, which are available on the Council's website. There's no planned evacuation drill this evening, and accordingly, if the alarm sounds, it is to be treated as a genuine need to evacuate. There are emergency exits to my right or through the passageway to my left, and as you leave the chamber, along the main staircase at the front of the building. But please note, lifts must not be used. The assembly point is on the far side of the car park, and it's important that you remain there and do not return to the building until I have announced that it is safe to do so. If anyone present will need assistance in evacuating and negotiating the stairs, please could you inform me now so that we can make necessary arrangements to assist you. Deathly silence. Okay, thank you. The meeting has a quasi-judicial role and determines the rights and obligations of the applicant. Members must consider each application and everything that is said in the meeting concerning the application and make their decision based solely on the planning judgment of the information available to them. Following a decision by members, delegated authority is given to the planning officer to issue the decision notice, and planning permission is not granted or refused until the issue of that decision notice. Any member of the council who is not a member of the planning committee may attend as a visiting member and may speak having given prior notification. Such visiting members may of course include ward members, and whilst visiting members can speak on an application, they are not permitted to vote. Any member acting as a substitute on the planning committee must have undertaken appropriate training before doing so. And members must remain in the meeting for the whole time that each item is debated and should not vote on that item unless they have done so. I'd now like to welcome our public speakers and remind you all that you have 3 minutes to speak, and an audible warning of time will be given when there are 30 seconds remaining. If the meeting is deferred to conduct a site meeting, you may speak both at this meeting and at the site meeting, but there will be no further opportunity to speak on the matter when it comes back to the planning committee. The meeting will follow the order set out in the agenda. However, I will amend the order if there's good reason for doing so. And in particular, I will take any items where a member of the public has registered to speak first, before moving on to the remainder of the agenda. And I will, of course, verbally reorder the agenda as appropriate. At this point in time, it's worth pointing out that item 3.1, Callum Park, Basser Hill, Lower Alstow, has been withdrawn from this evening's agenda. I'd now briefly like to hand over to our head of planning, if I may.
Thank you, Chair. Members, I apologise for the late delivery of the update sheet that you've had, but it's a situation that's been moving throughout the day. I'd like to ask the Chair's permission that you be given 10 minutes to read the update before we continue with the business of the meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Churchill. And yes, we'll do that. So we'll take a 10-minute recess so that members have the opportunity to read through the updates before we proceed. Thank you. Yeah, they're on the website, so. Okay, members, have you all had the opportunity to read through it? Okay, thank you very much. We now will move on to item 2, which is apologies for absence and any substitutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. I have apologies for absence for Councillor Monique Bonney and Councillor Mike Henderson, who is substituted by Councillor Hannah Perkin.
Thank you. Item 3 is to approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 23rd of June. Minute numbers 138 to 145. Is it your wish that I record them as true record, members? Thank you. Thank you. I now invite members' declarations of disclosable pecuniary interests under the Localism Act. Councillor Martin, please.
On item 2.2, I served as a substitute on Faversham Town Council's Planning Committee, so I will not be taking part in the debate on that item, though I did email Democratic Services and the Chair to request to speak on their behalf on that particular item as a Town Councillor visiting member of the public.
Okay, thank you. Any other non-pecuniary interests, members? Okay, I'll just remind you then that the meeting, remind the meeting that where it's possible that a fair-minded and informed observer, having considered the facts, would conclude that there was a real possibility that a member might be predetermined or biased on any agenda item, the member should declare this possibility and then leave the room whilst that item is considered. Item 5 then is the planning working group. And first of all, if we can approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 11th of July 2022. And this was the Burntwick, the street Upchurch. Those members that attended, can we agree that? Thank you.
And Chair, if I can just ask for one minor correction, I do believe I did send apologies in well in advance, probably before the date was set, because I know it's going to be a daytime one, but I did send some apologies.
Apologies, I get them recorded. Thank you. And so now we move on to item 21/506474 full, which is Burntwick, the street Upchurch. And I thank the officer for an outline and any updates, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. In terms of updates, there's no change to the application itself. And to remind members, the application is for a pair of semi-detached houses, which will be sited within the garden of property called Burntwick, which you can see just to the southwest of the application site. The site's in Upchurch, close to the historic core of Upchurch, but sits just outside of the built confines to the village. It also sits just outside the boundary of the conservation area, which wraps around number 21, which is this property here. So the boundary runs along here and then along this boundary here. So Burntwick and the application site itself are both outside of the conservation area. The design and layout of the development is as shown on this plan here. At the last planning committee, when the resolution was made for a site meeting, there was a suggestion that members may want to consider a more traditional design for the development, and that was discussed further at the site meeting, where some more traditional plans were presented informally. At the site visit, members, the general consensus and feedback from members was that it wasn't necessary to pursue an amendment to the design of the dwellings, so the application hasn't been changed. One of the other key issues that arose at the site meeting and was subject to a lot of discussion was the relationship with neighbouring properties, and I thought it might be useful just to go through and present to members how officers deal with relationships with neighbouring properties and how we assess those impacts. And a common tool that we use for this is guidelines from the Building Research Establishment, and it's called the Daylight and Sunlight Assessment. And it provides a relatively simple approach to measure the impacts of development on surrounding properties, and they're generally referred to as either the 45-degree test or the 25-degree test. What that means is that where a development's proposed, if there is a adjacent building that faces the development, you draw a line from the window of that building, a 25-degree line. And if the development falls within the 25-degree line or is obstructed by that line, then there is a likelihood that the development's likely to cause some form of unacceptable loss of light or sunlight. When properties are side by side, the 45-degree test is applied, which is where there is a projection to either the front or rear of the neighbouring property. A line is drawn at 45-degree angle, and an assessment is made as to whether or not the development would break through that line or not. And I've provided some, I've drawn some rough sketches here just to give an indication to members what the situation is here in terms of how the officers have assessed it. If I just first go back to the site plan, what we have here is relatively faint, but where my arrow is here, this is the back of a row of properties on the poles, which face, so their rear gardens face or back onto the application site and face the flank elevation of the development. And if you have a look at the sketch that I've done here, so this is number 9, the poles, which I've picked because that's the closest property to the dwelling on plot 2. I've sketched this out and I've taken into account that there is a drop in levels here between the application site and this property on the poles. The 25-degree line you see here, I've drawn from the tallest part of the development, and it hits the neighbouring property within their back garden. If you actually take it from the neighbouring window itself and draw a 25-degree line, you can see there that it quite significantly clears the proposed development. I've then done the same with number 21, the poles, which is this property here. It doesn't quite enjoy a face-to-face relationship because number 24 is orientated slightly away, but I've taken that as a worst case scenario. And this is the same sketch here. Now this property does sit more considerably lower than the application site by about 1.5 metres. But again, you'll see that where the 25-degree line is drawn here from the development, it doesn't hit the neighbouring property. And when you draw the 25-degree line from the windows in the neighbouring property, again, it easily sails over the top of the development. And then finally, there was some discussion about the impact on number 21, which is this property here. Now, because this sits side to side with the proposed development, that's where the 45-degree test is undertaken. And if you look at this, the 45-degree angle's drawn there on the development, and it sits well away from the neighbouring property. And again, where you take the angle from the nearest window in the neighbouring property, I mean, that is a bit of an estimate there, but clearly you can see, estimate or not, that the angle is well away from being breached by the proposed development. So I just wanted to show that to members, which may help them in their decision making when they debate this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Byrne. Could I now invite Councillor Palmer as a ward member to speak on this item?
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to refer people to paragraph 12 of the NPPF. The presumption in favour of sustainable development does not change the statutory status of the development plan as the starting point for decision making. Where the planning application conflicts with an up-to-date development plan, permission should not normally be granted. Local planning authorities may deviate from that, but the need needs to be on material grounds. This application is outside the built-up area, and if we look at policy DM19, the design of buildings, I think this is an overdevelopment in the garden, and it will also conflict with some of the development plans and the council's climate emergency, because it's a tier 5 development and the occupants here would need to rely on the car. So the extent to which occupants rely on the car would not contribute to reduced emissions or move into a low carbon economy, which are also important objectives of this council and of the development plan. We've often hear about the tilted balance, the shortfall in the 5-year housing land supply, which actually now stands at 4.8 for this council, and it's often referred to as the tilted balance. But don't forget, it's the development plan that takes priority. It's only a weight that you give, and 4.8 is a negligible weight in my view, and that was made quite clear in a case in Jubilee Fields, Upchurch, where the planning inspector at appeal said the lack of the 5-year supply does not override the development plan, and in fact he used the term that in planning terms Upchurch is a tier 5, so in planning terms it's one of the least desirable sites that you would put housing in. So I feel that this is over intensified development in the garden. It is contrary to the policies of the council, policy ST3, and would undermine the council's overall spiritual strategy, which is part of delivering sustainable development style as set out in policy ST1. So even so there's a tilted balance, the tilted balance is so negligible, I feel that the weight should be given to the local plans. It's one of the least, it's a village which is a tier 5 village. It is least desirable location in planning terms for new residential development, and that was made quite clear when I raised the Jubilee Fields case. The officer who actually said that didn't apply to Tenham, it applied to Upchurch, which is tier 5, and that's what we're looking at tonight. And this application should be refused because the policies of the local plan, the development plan, and the MPPF actually say this policy should be refused, and the tilted balance is of such a negligible weight that the council shouldn't give it any consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now move the officer recommendation. Could I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Jays. Members, Councillor Hunt, please.
Thanks, Chair. I think the site meeting was well worth it, this one, and thanks to the officers and the agent as well. It's more of a lesson than a site visit. I think it was good to hear some of the things that were being said, especially with the overshadowing. And that did seem to be the major thing from residents that were living there. The ones that came to the site seemed to be more accepting that some form of development would take place, but it was the concern of what impacts that had. And I think what we were told on there and what we've heard tonight about the angles and how the overshadowing, I think that has been looked at, and yeah, it's well within the limits that are allowed. So I can't see that there is any reason why it can be refused on those grounds. What I did notice is a large tree, and that's what I sort of thought of as well, is that there was some discussion about whether there could be a landscaping scheme that comes forward. But if you try and block the development and not seeing it, you go and probably plant some large trees and cause overshadowing. And I think it's better just leaving as it is and going along with what we've got. I did raise last time about the design, and I thought it may be that something more in keeping with the area, but having been there and looked, there's lots of different types of property, and I think actually because it is a good design that's come forward, I think it's better to stick with what we've got and not trying to alter it. This design that we've got that could happen, it's the same scale and bulk and everything that we had, but trying to change windows, I think when you start doing that, you start to lose the look of that original property. So it's better to stick with that. With it being sustainable area, we've got no chance on that one. You've got shops right opposite and a bus stop. To say that it's in an unsustainable area is ridiculous, really. And what we've also heard as well, have got these updates on tonight, and thanks to officers, because it is a thorough updates that we've got, and it's good to actually start seeing now the situation that we're in with the 5-year supply, and with our local plan basically running out and not being able to give as much weight. So what we did here from ward member there was that a lot of the local plan policies, but that has got even less weight at the stage we're at now. And we do need to start approving more properties and get it over the 5-year supply and not just be happy with a 4.8 supply as well. So it's a good design. It meets all the criteria. It doesn't have any detrimental impact from what officers say, and I go along with that, and I think it should be approved.
Thank you. Councillor Winkles, please.
Thank you, Chair. I slightly disagree with the previous speaker. I did attend the site. I feel that 2 properties in that garden is no intensification. I think 1 property would be okay, but to have 2 in that garden, especially the one that is proposed to be built at the northern end of the garden. We did go around and have a look at the residents' property, which is concerned about shadowing from sunlight. So I do have grave concerns to go with the officer's recommendations on this one. Before I make a decision, I will listen to the rest of the debate. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Martin, please.
I actually concur with Councillor Hunt on this one. I think one of the things that we have all heard over the years is how villages die because people get older and then there's no replacement stock for the young in the village to remain in the village. They move away, the school closes because there's no families, then the post office closes and the pub. This is organic development, natural organic growth for a village setting. It's not over intensive, it's 2 units. It keeps a local person in the area. I think they're actually quite good designs. I quite like the designs. And as I say, I think it's something that should be encouraged elsewhere in terms of having a small amount of organic growth within village areas to ensure that villages thrive in the long term. And there are no real harmful planning impacts that I can see. So I fully endorse the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Members of Councillor Hall.
Chairman, could you just remind me of the parking facilities, please?
Mr. Burton, can you?
Yeah, certainly. So both properties have 3 parking spaces to the front of the property, and plot 2 also has a garage here as well. No, 3 each. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Members, I don't see anyone else indicating, so we'll take this one to the vote. Those in favour of the officer recommendation for approval? Those against? And abstentions, please. That's 11 for, 2 against and 3 abstentions. So permission is granted subject to the issue of the decision notice. Thank you. Right, members, we now move on to deferred item 1. And this one is 20/50591 out, and it's land at Highfield Road, Minster. And I'll thank the officer for an outline and any updates, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just trying to share my screen, but it's gone. I'm going to go slow. Once that loads, I'll start, and hopefully that will load in the meantime. Oh, excellent. There are no updates for the application. Members will recall the application was discussed at Planning Committee in March and was deferred to allow independent highways advice to be sought. The updated committee report and its appendices set out the independent advice received and concludes that proposal would be compliant with local and national highways policies. The application seeks outline planning permission with all matter reserved aside from the access for a total of 16 units with the inclusion of approximately 0.7 hectares of open space and community orchard. The application site is highlighted in red, and the plans below show that the application site is outside the assessment boundary and is within the important countryside gap. The site is considered to be in a sustainable location within walking distance of local amenities and transport links, and the council cannot demonstrate a 5-year housing anti-buy, and therefore the tilted balance is engaged. Therefore, approval is recommended subject to conditions. In terms of the site context on the screen, the site is highlighted in red with Highfield Road to the north, Oasis Academy to the right, and open land to the south, including grazing paddocks. Here are some photos of Highfield Road. This is the access proposed to the site. And there's just some context of Highfield Road. These photos show the site, and at the moment it's currently equestrian grazing paddocks. In terms of the proposal itself, the orange areas show where the proposed built form will be, and the community orchard and open space will be to the south of the site. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Could I now invite Simon Brazier, please, to speak on this item?
Hello there. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, loud and clear. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for letting me sort of speak on this. I do object to the actual the application. The primary thing is the loss of the countryside gap. As it is a designated area and recognised as a countryside gap, the areas are created to protect against urban sprawl and to create areas where wildlife can flourish, and certainly in this day and age to promote the green and wooded areas to assist us in helping to meet the climate change goals. I believe that if this proposal were to be approved, we would lose this vital barrier and its diverse nature of wildlife, and once lost it will never come back. Once built on, it's there, it's finished. As a countryside gap, and of course the local plan is designated by the Swale Borough Council, and the council as a whole set these targets, limits or whatever, and if we just come along and ignore the countryside gaps and say, well, yep, that'll be okay, we gradually keep chipping away at countryside gap until it's not there. And of course, would the approval of the officers saying this is a good development change the policy for Swale Council on these areas? Would it be overlooked? And I think for this reason, the countryside gap is very important, certainly within that area and with the developments that could go on in the future. There was also an issue around the traffic flow into the site itself and out onto Highfield Road. I've read the Highways response to the traffic flow, and they set up a survey between the 28th of April and the 4th of May. Unfortunately, in the middle of that was a bank holiday, so therefore it was a relatively quiet period. Outside of there, certainly when the traffic lights at the junction of Minster and Queenborough roads become congested, Highfield Road then becomes a rat run. And the speeds of the traffic can exceed regularly the 30 miles an hour or the 20 mile an hour speed limit as it stands at the moment. I still feel that there is an issue with the access to this, as it's relatively close to the Prower Hill. And although there hasn't been an accident in the past 5 years, that can't be said that going forward with this access road and where it comes out wouldn't create an accident black spot. And the final thing is more of a general observation of why I feel that the planning should be refused at this stage. As you're aware, the Isle of Sheppey last week was without water for 3 days.
Okay, that's your 3 minutes. Thank you very much indeed.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Could I now invite Michelle Bolger, please, to speak on this item?
Hello, can you see me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can see and hear you. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm addressing you this evening on behalf of the applicant. I'm an experienced landscape architect, familiar with the area, having acted as expert landscape witness at the Barton Hill Drive appeal. In my role on this application, I've advised on how to develop the site whilst avoiding significant adverse landscape or visual effects. The site is on the northeast facing slope of the ridge, with the south facing slope falling to Lower Road. The site lies behind residential properties on Highfield Road with a raised reservoir to the west, the Oasis Academy to the east and Countryside to the south. Views from the south from Lower Road were identified as a constraint because an important part of the sense of separation between Minster and Halfway is the lack of views of Halfway from Lower Road. To maintain this, development is restricted to the northern part of the site. Existing woodland at the southern end is retained, managed and reinforced, and a community orchard is created within the western spur. The site is within an important local countryside gap, and that's intended to maintain the separate identities of settlements here of Halfway and Minster. By restricting development to the northern half of the site, there will be no change to the sense of separate settlements from Lower Road. To the north, there is already continuous development along Minster Road, and the Oasis Academy has consolidated this as it adjoins development in both settlements. On plan, the application site appears close to the consented Barton Hill Drive site. However, this does not reflect how the development will be perceived on the ground. This is principally because the site is on the north-facing slope, whilst the Barton Hill Drive site is on the south-facing slope. In the 170 metres plus between them are the top of the ridge, the highest land within the site on which no development is proposed, existing woodland hedges on the site which are to be retained and enhanced, and a tree belt along the boundary of the Oasis Academy. There'll be no intervisibility between the developments, nor will there be public locations from which both developments could be seen. I consider this site causes less visual or landscape harm than any other potential residential site I've assessed on Sheppey. It shares the qualities identified by the Bartlett's Close Appeal Inspector in that it's visibly contained, has residential development close to its boundary, has limited visibility from the adjoining countryside, notably less than Bartlett's Close, and would not result in any significant erosion of the countryside gap. I feel sure that an inspector considering this case would reach a similar conclusion, and I therefore respectfully ask that members approve the scheme in line with your officer's recommendation.
That's your 3 minutes. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, I now move the officer recommendation. Could I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Jays. And as it sits within Councillor Beards and Councillor Marchington's parish, would you like to speak first on it?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'd like to keep that screen on, if I may, for a while. And while they're talking about the countryside gap, remember the green lanes that are used by wildlife to go from one area to another need to be a continuous run. And if you look at that, you watch everything coming from Furze Hill and go up towards the Academy, across a very narrow part of the Minster Road, which happens to be very private dwellings with lots of trees and things, and links into other green parts of it. If we build there, I know they're saying that they're going to put the green part on the south edge and only a bit around. That's easy to say now because it's only agricultural ground. It was very cheap to buy. It only wants a couple more step outs, and suddenly the whole lot will move forward, and the countryside gap will end up being lost forever. And that is something that we really, really must think strongly on. So that's one reason why I'm against this. I also think that the narrow entrance from the Highfield Road, I know it's legal size, but it's still knocking down a building and creating a shoehorn effect to get to it, and then only increases traffic on what is already highly strung in the way it's done. So that's 2 reasons why I'm against it. And at the moment, I don't see that I can support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Beard.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I agree with the comments made by Mr. Brayshaw regarding it is this council that decides when we form a local plan where our important, and the word is important, local countryside gap is. We put a line and say this is where we will and won't accept development, and this is in the important local countryside gap. It's in the area that we designated that we wanted to keep as open space. I do welcome the comments from Ms Bolger, and I remember the debates that were had at the Barton Hill Drive appeal. And I also welcome the highway advice that we asked for, and I respect the outcome of that. I don't know if Kent Highways are on the call, but one thing I would pick up is that when we discussed this last time, Kent Highways were in a position where they were planning to close the Crescent in halfway to reduce some of the rat running. Now, when that went to the JTB voted not to accept it. Now, as far as I know, as of the last JTB, there has been no outcome of that decision. So I think it would be premature, because the things that KCC have put in place to design out these issues hasn't been agreed yet. And whilst it isn't part of this scheme, it is supposed to be funded by a development that we approved and put it on as a condition. And that development has already been built, but because the JTB in their wisdom decided not to accept it, the likelihood is that Section 106 will fall, or Section 278 will fall away. The other item that Mr. Brayshaw was just about to get onto when he ran out of time, this is right next door to the South Down Reservoir. If anything that the last week has shown us is that the water supply on the island is insufficient, and I would say that with Southern Water's site directly next to this, the only thing that should be built on that site is another reservoir. But obviously we must look at the application in front of us. So for me, the erosion of the important local countryside gap for a development of this size concerns me greatly. And I don't think the tilted balance necessarily needs to come in on this.
Thank you. Councillor Jones, please.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with Councillor Marchington. We cannot keep losing our local countryside gaps, and I think this road is unsafe as it is now, so I cannot support an access on Browther Hill. And I'd like to call for a recorded vote if I have the support of the committee on that.
Councillor Winkles.
Thank you, Chair. I have mixed views on this one. I've taken on board what Cameron Burke has said, and the other ward councillor. As it's been proved before, when we, since I've been sitting on this planning committee, when we do refuse some of these applications, it goes to appeal, we lose. I am mystified sometimes why the inspectors go against us as a local democratic planning committee, but that is what happens. So I've a very difficult decision for me on this one, on a balance, whether we go with the recommendations and risk, or go against the recommendations and risk an appeal.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hunt, please.
Thanks, Chair. I think the problem is when we do these local countryside gaps, everyone thinks that they suddenly got a massive protection and nothing can be built there, which isn't the case at all. It just adds that extra layer that will give some protection to it. But when we haven't got that 5-year supply, and again the tilted balance, it's just something that weighs in favour of going against. And officers have obviously considered that and come up with the balance is still in favour of the new homes. I think there's obviously a lot of work that's gone into the landscaping of this, and I do think it's going to be difficult to argue the case where the development has been kept into the north. When you've got housing to the west there that does jut out, to then go and say that this part can't happen because it's going to jut out too far with that landscape and the amount of work that's gone into the design of that, I don't think we've got any argument with it. So I would go with officers.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Martin, please.
Strangely enough, I concur with Councillor Hunt. It's incredibly difficult to see how, if this was refused, we could ever defend an appeal. We would be going against our officers, and we've seen how difficult it is to win an appeal where we are going against an officer's decision. We have heard and read this evening that the local plan has reached a point where it has less weight because of how long since it was last reviewed and adopted. We are aware that we don't have a 5-year supply, so our countryside gaps have less weight than we would want them to have. Let's be very honest, no one in this room would want to approve development in the countryside gaps that were originally designated, but we're in a position whereby it is exceptionally difficult for us to continue to apply policy that was drafted back in 2015, 16 and 17 and adopted then, when we don't have new policies to replace it yet. So we are in the position that we're in. It's well designed. It does appear that it would have limited harm compared to potential alternatives. You know, it's not like they're suggesting building 22-storey blocks of flats on the top of a hill. They're talking about housing hidden behind a slope with tree planting, hopefully native species tree planting, with a community orchard. Unfortunately, for us on this one, I think the harms are outweighed by the benefits.
Thank you. I'm just going to bring our legal officer in briefly on this, the tilted balance element, because this is something that may well crop up through the rest of the evening, and it's probably just as well that we get it clear now.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. And not wishing to sound like a broken record, because I distinctly remember saying this at the last meeting of this committee. The NPPF is very, very clear where you have policies and in your development plan that are out of date, as Councillor Martin's just been referring to, and that applies where there is no 5-year supply and you have not reached the level required in the housing delivery test. Then you should be taking very limited weight on those policies, and you should be approving the development unless the adverse impacts of doing so would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. So if you are going to be minded to refuse the application, you will need to be very clear what those harms are and how they significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. I'll just leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see anybody else indicating, so I'll take this one to the vote. Those in favour of the officer recommendation for approval?
Chair,
sorry. Yes, you did indeed. Yes. OK, so Councillor Beart.
Against.
Councillor Darby. Councillor Eakin.
Against.
Myself. For. Councillor Hall. Councillor Hunt.
For.
Councillor Jackson.
For.
Councillor Jays. Councillor Marchington. Councillor Martin.
For.
Councillor Rolls.
For.
Councillor Simmons.
For.
Okay. And Councillor Stephen. Councillor Valentine. For. Councillor Winkless.
For.
And Councillor Perkin.
For.
Thank you. That's 10 for, 6 against, and no abstentions. So permissions granted, subject to the issue of decision notice. Thank you, members. We're now going to skip ahead to deferred item 3, as that one's got speakers on it. And this one is 21/503749/REM. And it's land on the southeast side of Bartlett's Close, halfway. Thank you. I'll thank the officer for an outline and any updates.
Thank you, Chair. There are no updates to this other than the committee papers. Members will recall this application for reserve matters was discussed at Planning Committee back in May and was deferred to allow a planning working group site meeting, which took place in June. After the site meeting, the application was amended and plots 1 and 2, which were here on as highlighted, have been which were a pair of 2-storey dwellings, have been replaced with 1 single-storey dwelling, which is a bungalow. And the total number of dwellings on the site have been reduced from 17 to 16. The site benefits from outline planning consent for 17 dwellings and includes detailed approval for the access into the site. As outline planning consent has been approved, matters such as the principal development, highways impact, drainage and impact on services and facilities have been considered acceptable by virtue of this consent. The current proposal seeks approval of 4 reserved matters, which are appearance, landscaping, layout and scale. As the application is for approval of reserved matters, the consideration only relate to these narrow scope of issues for which the reserved matters relate. In terms of the site, the plan before is a site layout which shows a T-shaped access road with dwellings either side. Plots 1, 16 and 17, let's zoom in a bit, are single-storey bungalows. The remainder of the dwellings are 2-storey, with some houses having rooms in the roof. Part of the outline consent, there was a condition for a 5-metre landscaping buffer on the boundaries with the open countryside, as the site does fall within the important countryside gap, and therefore the buffer is to partially screen your development and provide a soft landscape edge to the site. I'll just show some of the elevations of the proposed dwellings. So this is plot 1, which is a single-storey bungalow. Also includes 1 row of terraces, which are 2-storey in scale. The other side of the axis is plots 16 and 17, which are also a pair of bungalows, and the remainder of plots are semi-detached 2-storey dwellings. Chair.
Thank you very much. Could I now invite Mr. Philip Healy, please, to speak on this item?
Hello, Chair. Mr. Healy hasn't been able to join the meeting remotely, so I will read his statement out for him.
Okay, thank you.
The layout and scale of this development extends the cul-de-sac that is Bartlett's Close. Plots 1, 16 and 17 have the same orientation as the existing dwellings. However, plot 1 sits significantly further forward than the current housing line. Not only does this dramatically alter the street scene of Bartlett's, but also has a severe impact on number 10 from loss of light. Due to the height advantage that this site commands, plots 3, 4, 14 and 15 will look directly into the living area of dwellings in both Bartlett's and Belgrave Road, losing the privacy they have enjoyed for some 50 years. The density of this development is far greater than Bartlett's Close currently and contradicts the aims of paragraph 124 of the NPPF, particularly with regard to maintaining an area's prevailing character and setting, including residential gardens. There are no 2-bedroom properties in Bartlett's Close or any of the roads that surround this development. Bartlett's Close is made up of only detached dwellings. This development has just 1 detached dwelling. More than this, 11 out of the 12 dwellings currently in Bartlett's Close are bungalows. This development proposes just 3 bungalows out of 16 dwellings, all with significantly smaller gardens than the residents of Bartlett's Close enjoy. If the committee are like-minded to approve this application, it should not be done before the density of the plot is reduced to reflect the criteria set out in the NPPF, with the balance tipped in favour of bungalows over houses. This site is designated as Countryside Gap, as such should meet the requirements of rural parking standards. Even taking into account suburban parking standards cited in the SPD adopted by the Council in June 2020, this site is woefully short of parking spaces both for residents and visitors. This is particularly true when you add in the number of home offices that are detailed on the 3-bedroom plots. That are the same size as the bedrooms on the 4 bed plots. If the council are like-minded to approve this application, it should not be done before the developer provides sufficient parking that complies with the SPD. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I now invite Mr. Bashir, please, to speak on this item?
Hello, my name is Arafat Bashir, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with us and the project by now. We have been here before, so thank you for your time for listening to us this evening. An on-site meeting on this was held, and during that meeting, a range of concerns were raised with regards to drainage, sewage, and the road. We have agreed to maintain and resurface the road as a goodwill gesture, though it was established at appeal when this development was approved that the road was deemed acceptable for this development by Kent County Council Highways. Full access rights have also been granted for the use of this road. Concerns were also raised over the positioning and size of a couple of houses, as has been mentioned earlier on. We took these concerns on board and reduced the scheme down to 16 units by replacing a pair of houses with one bungalow. That bungalow has also now been repositioned so that it is more in keeping with the existing build line on Bartlett's Close of the properties there, demonstrating we are open and willing to work with the neighbours. I'd also like to state at this stage that the principle of this development has been established at appeal. All of the guidelines of the National Planning Policy have been met, and we have addressed many of the objections that were raised. This scheme also helps address the shortfall of houses in the borough. As regards the design of the houses, our houses will have charm, character, and they will be places where people aspire to live. Furthermore, this development is open, it's spacious, with ample greenery, including a 5-metre landscaping buffer, which is actually positive for the environment. We are not huge developers, but we do build houses with passion. We enjoy it. Additionally, this development will overall contribute to the local area positively in many aspects. We will be making massive contributions to local amenities such as schools, nurseries and medical centres through in the region of £250,000 in Section 106 payments. Let's not also forget that the best part of £3 million will be spent on this development. That money will be spent, much of it will be spent on local businesses and local people, helping the local economy of Sheerness. Having said that, needless to say, on a personal level, we have a lot riding on this. To finish off, we would like to bring to the attention of the committee that this application is for the approval of reserved matters for appearance, landscaping, layout and scale. There will be the opportunity to comment on the other points of concern when those applications are submitted. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. I now move the officer recommendation. Could I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Jays. And once again, it's in Councillor Beards and Councillor Marchington ward. So I'll give you the opportunity to speak first. Should so desire. You're jumping in straight away, then, Mr. Marchington.
Thank you, Chair. Cameron goes on a lot longer than me. I'm only call short. The question I'd like to ask at the moment is, has the section condition 7 been sorted out with Southern Water on the flood thing? Because that's the primary worry about the bill going in, and then that doesn't end up right.
With regard to conditions, none of the conditions on the outline consent have been submitted to the council for approval. So I think the intention is that they're doing the reserve matters first, securing the layout, and once the layout is sorted, then they'll submit the details for conditions afterwards.
it's never going to be right. So there's no agreement on what attenuation system they wish to use.
So the outline scheme had provisional details which were agreeable to KCC Flood and Water Management, and they included a mix of permeable surfaces and attenuation tanks. And KCC Flood and Water Management had no objection at that stage, and we're happy with it to be dealt with by a detailed condition, which is fairly standard for a site of this size.
Okay, because I know earlier that they said it was stated by Swale Borough Council that they had no objection, when actual fact the truth was they were unable to comment because they had no information. I'll leave it at that one. The road is the main issue with me, because no one's prepared. If the site is not can't put a fairly short bit of road in proper highways terms, then it's not viable. And I just see it that way right from the start, and I'm afraid that's a personal view of mine. The site looks good. I like the design, but the road is going to be a nightmare for other people, and that's what we've got to think of. The right of access that they've got. I've had this with myself with own properties where for with Sterling Homes, a lot of unimpeded access. It's only single lane. It's not two lanes for vehicles overtaking each other. So I can see a dispute coming up on this, and I'd hate to see the new site end up in disputes with existing neighbours. So I'm afraid, although I like the design, it's done very well, and I appreciate what the developers are saying, the roadway, I'm afraid, is still to me an unanswered question, and therefore I must withdraw. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burt.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. As I stated last time, we know that the outline for this has already been established by the Inspectorate Appeal. We can't go back on old ground, and I think a lot of the residents speaking to them are agreement to that fact, that they know this site will be developed. What they wanted was to make sure that it was the right sort of development. Picking up on that, I think what we did last time by sending it to a site visit was wholly correct, by the fact that when we got to the site visit, the developer had significantly taken on board the comments that were made by the committee and made a change. Now, some will say losing one plot isn't a significant change, but it is when you're looking at we've got to accept a developer has brought this. They're looking to make a profit, but also to provide enough units on the land that's there. To drop it down by one unit, and we've also lost what was there was two-story houses. We've now got a single bungalow that's replaced it. So I commend the developer for doing that, and I think that's something that really should have come out of the earlier stages, and perhaps shows where it should have gone with pre-planning advice. Obviously, the outline was by a different developer, and I believe it's changed hands since then. So we're in different ground. With regards to Mr. Healy's comments, I wondered if the officer could just quickly clarify, when it says in the report that it's been approved against the SP or in line with the SPD, was that done against the rural category, or was it done against suburban? I think that's important to understand. But for me, yes, the appearance, the landscaping, the layout, the scale is what worries me. This does drastically change the outlook of that entire setting. Members who went up there will have seen that it's all bungalows, and now we're going to have this line of townhouses sitting with the backdrop of the hill. I don't know if that gives any sort of reason for refusal, so I'm very much in an open mind at the moment, but I do welcome the fact that plot 1 has changed significantly, and I think we were right what the decision we made at the last committee. And similarly to deferred 1, I'd like to request a recorded vote on this one.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Martin, please.
So did you want to let the officer answer Councillor Pitt's question first?
I'll be kind enough to do that, thank you.
Cheers.
With regard to parking as set out in the report at paras 6.118 to 620, given the application site adjacent to the built-up area boundary and that will effectively form part of halfway, the suburban standards have been used. which requires 1 to 2 spaces per 2-bed house, 2 to 3 spaces per 3-bed house, and 3+ spaces for 4-bed house, and 0.2 visitor spaces per unit. The application proposal meets these. It proposes 2 spaces per 2-bed house, 2 spaces per 3-bedroom house, and 3 spaces for 4-bedroom house. The 3 visitor spaces are proposed on the site, which falls slightly short of the standard, which requires 3.2 spaces. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Martin, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think this can also be used as a nice education piece for us in some ways. The removal of 2 two-storey dwellings and replacement with 1 demonstrates exactly what's been said many times before. A bungalow requires twice the footprint of a 2-storey dwelling to be able to provide the same number of rooms. It should be fairly sensible that we know that, but it is proof in hard black and white and yellow in this case that is the case. We have an outline approval for 17. We're now getting 16. I don't think we're going to get much better. I think this the developers clearly thought and listened. The design generally is thereabouts. I think we would struggle to defend if we didn't approve. And though I do have sympathy with local residents and the ward member on it, I think this is one we would have to support. And I would be amiss if I didn't mention, and I know we had in the table update that we can't, but if this was anywhere else in the borough, we'd be trying to get affordable units on it. We can't because it's on Sheppey with our current policies. And let's face it, if it was anywhere else, we'd be hoping that one of the housing associations was coming forward with it as a rural exception site. And if they did come forward with a design like this for a rural exception site, we'd be ripping their arms off. So I think actually we do need to approve tonight.
Thank you. Councillor Winkles, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yet again, I attended the site meeting. I will repeat a little bit what I said earlier on. We've already lost on the outline, and we've had cost against us. I cannot understand how we lost the first case, but we did. All I'm going to say is I have great concerns going against the officer's recommendations on this, but I will listen to any further debate. I'll make a mind up. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rolls, please.
Yes, Chair. I attended the site meeting. I was quite impressed with the location. I go along with the alterations that have been made, and I agree with the other councillors, Councillor Martin and Councillor Burt, that it should go ahead, and I will be approving.
Thank you. Councillor Perkin, please.
Thanks, Chair. I just wondered whether we could shore up recommendation 9 a little bit, because I realised that on 8.25 and 8.26 there's some really good effort to increase biodiversity in the development, but in 9 it doesn't really kind of put that in as many words into the recommendation. So I was wondering whether we could specifically state that the planting should be designed to increase biodiversity in the area, and that we should put a kind of time frame on the maintenance plan for that. Is that something we can do?
Okay, thank you. I'll ask our officer if he can advise us on that one.
Sorry, are you talking about condition 9 on the reserve matters application, or condition 9 on the outline consent?
Condition 9 that's outlined on page 149.
Okay, so so the conditions for the reserve matters solely relate to reserve matters, and there are conditions on the outline consent. So the conditions on the outline consent do include ecological enhancements within the site, and the landscaping details submitted include a mix of native species along the landscaping buffer in terms of the hedgerows and the trees, and there are some native species within the site itself. And KCC Ecology have commented on this application. They're happy with the details for the landscaping on the reserve matters in terms of the buffer and within the site. And I'm just double checking the conditions on the outline. So the conditions on the outline, there is, as I said, there's a condition for biodiversity improvements. There's also a condition regarding the safeguarding of wildlife for badgers, reptiles, great crested newts, breeding birds and hedgehogs. And that requires detail to be submitted to council for approval. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see anyone else indicated members, so now I'm going to go through the votes. Apologies, Councillor Hunt.
You're looking through that little circle. Yeah, I mean, not really much more to add to what others have said, but I just do want to pick up on the road. I don't think much has been said about that. But it is a bad surface down that road, and I think there was some issues with the drains down there. But they're issues that already exist, and I think from what we've seen as well, the developer's gone sort of beyond what they need to do. And you know, we can't really complain about that. I just think that with listening to residents and reducing that bungalow and with the road, I think developers are showing that they are going sort of above and beyond, and it's good to see a small developer coming in and taking the chances. The problem has been in the past with this site being approved, but then you get another developer come in and gets all the blame for everything. I just think it needs to be noted that developers do listen, and they're taking it forward. One thing I do just want to pick up on is a section 106. We've got one less property now. I assume that the section 106 is updated in line with that, because there's no mention of that in there.
Yeah, normally with an outline application, the contributions will be calculated on a per dwelling delivered basis. So the terms of the Section 106 agreement will specify a per dwelling amount for each of the contributions, and there will be a formula which will then be worked through to give the final contribution. So where you have an up to figure, if you deliver less than that, the contributions will be factored down accordingly.
Thank you. Councillor Valentine, please.
Thank you. I noticed there isn't an energy efficiency condition in the conditions here. I don't know if something is captured in the outline permission.
Condition 14 of the outline consent, as approved by the Inspectorate, which is on page 186 of the agenda, relates to energy efficiency. It's not the standard wording of our 50% reduction condition, but this was applied by the Inspectorate.
Okay, thank you. Right, members, we'll go to vote with this one then, please. Councillor Beard.
Against.
Councillor Darby.
Against.
Councillor Eakin.
For.
Myself, 4. Councillor Hull. Councillor Hunt.
For.
Councillor Jackson.
4.
Councillor Jays. Councillor Marchington. Councillor Martin.
4.
Councillor Rolls.
4.
Councillor Simmons.
4.
Councillor Stephen. Councillor Valentine.
Abstain.
Councillor Winkless.
Abstain.
And Councillor Perkin.
4.
Thank you. That's 10 for, 2 against, and 4 against, sorry, and 2 abstentions. Thank you. So permission is granted, subject to the issue of the decision notice. Thank you, members. And I want to move on to item 2.1, please. And this one is 2.1/503124 out. and it's land to the north of Elm Lane, Minster. I'll thank the officer for an outline and any update, please.
That one. Thank you very sorry for that. Members have had a lot of time this evening to read the update sheet, so I won't go through that in detail. I'll just mention one point and verbally update you on two developments since that was drafted. The first development is there was a query that the report referred to bus services by Arriva. Arriva stopped doing those inter-island services last year, but I'm confirmed by Kent County Council that Chalkwell have taken it over. So in terms of sustainability of the site, in terms of the MPPF, there's no change. The other point is there's been a late objection from a resident of the island with photographs of traffic this evening. I believe this congestion has been caused by the temporary closure over the summer period of Sir Collies Road for the construction of the footway on the Slips development, which adjoins this site. This site north of Elms Lane will not require any further closure of Scockler's, sorry, excuse my pronunciation if that's wrong, it's quite an unusual name, Scockler's Road. And of course, the development of the Slips footway will considerably improve the accessibility for pedestrians, etc. In this area. I'll just highlight one area which has been a cause for concern, where we had a question from a councillor regarding water supply, given the recent water emergency on the island. I've included in the report, which affects all of the Minster sites on the agenda, according to the update sheets. This is a matter really outside planning control because it's covered by the Ofwat in their regulation of Southern Water. So of course members can write to Ofwat and ask them to undertake their powers to ensure resilience of the water supply. Also, there's a development yesterday from the Department of Levelling Up. They've put forward amendments to the Levelling Up bill to give a duty to the water companies to ensure that sewage treatment plants meet the targets in local plans and don't cause any pollution. There's no such clause for potable supply, and it might well be a good reason for your leader to write to Glenn Clark saying, why isn't there a similar clause? Because it's an equally important issue, but that's a matter for you. Just going through the site, just point out a few differences between this site and other sites in the east of Minster, where we've put forward or are likely to put forward different recommendations. Sorry, I think the power on my laptop has gone. It's got a very dodgy battery, so I'll do this verbally. This site is different from other sites in the eastern part of Minster, such as west of Elms Lane nearby and the site adjoining, really for three fundamental reasons. Firstly, this is not agricultural land. This is a paddock. And as a paddock, it's classified as previously developed land. Secondly, this site has not been before you as members for inclusion in bearing fruit. It's only recently been promoted. And given the adjoining site, which shares almost identical characteristics, the Slips development, which your members approved last year, if it came forward again, it's likely to be recommended for inclusion. Primarily, the landscape issues are radically different. The sites to the north, the agenda describes this as rolling, quite attractive countryside. This is flat, it's enclosed, it's previously developed. It's the former railway station site, a brownfield site of the Sheppey Light Railway, and it doesn't have the views that you have of the Minster Abbey Grade 1 complex, which you have for the sites to the north and the south. So it's very different, and this has been confirmed by our independent landscape assessors who don't pull their punches, who say that they agree with the developers' landscape advisors that there would be no landscape reason for refusal. There was also the concern, well, why doesn't it have affordable housing? Well, it's the local plan policy, of course. We know it's a little bit out of date because affordable housing has got more viable on the island, but that's a matter for the local plan review. The developers on one site on this agenda have voluntarily offered affordable housing, and you might well ask, although you couldn't really deny it if they said no, why aren't they doing the same? But that's a matter for the developers. Just referring to the issue that was led to the number of objections, 90 plus objections, there are concerns about traffic on Scockler's Road. We've again had this independently assessed by our independent traffic reviewers, the project centre, and they've come to the conclusion that the Kent County Council and the developers' traffic consultants have correctly assessed the site, and there'd be no reason to refuse the scheme given the strict test in paragraph 111 of the MPPF that it has to cause severe congestion. This development will generate one vehicle about once every 3 minutes, and together with the other developments along Scockler's Road, where we've secured footway improvements and so on, it will be difficult to sustain a refusal. Just finally, referring early on in the meeting, members referred to policy ST3, and that policy in clause 5 includes the wording unless supported by national policy. And our legal officer has pointed that out, and the agenda points out as well that development boundaries are one of the policies that are considered out of date when you don't have a 5-year supply. The shortfall is 209 units going into the meeting today. Following your decision so far tonight, it's 192. That's fairly marginal, but it's significant. And as our legal officer explained, the tilted balance still applies, but it is a major material consideration approving developments that get you nearer to that point of, to coin a phrase, of you bringing back control and ensuring that your local plan is again paramount. Thank you very much, members. Oh, just finally, there is around £6 million of planning obligations contributions which have been agreed with the developer, mostly as requested from Kent County Council and the community care group for improvements to schools, primary health care and public transport in the area. Thank you very much, members.
Thank you very much. Could I now invite Parish Councillor John Stanford from Minster Parish Council to speak on this one, please?
Good evening, Chair, and good evening, members. I'm Chair of the Planning and Transport Minster Parish Council, and I'm here to object to this application. First of all, the proposal for the development of a substantial greenfield site is not something that we are very happy with. It lies within the open countryside, within a predominantly rural setting, outside the local planned development area as it exists at the moment. If it goes ahead, it will result in the loss of open countryside to the detriment of a much loved landscape, a precious rural amenity to many and residents' well-being. It would also displace the prolific wildlife that's long been a feature of the site, putting further pressure on Sheppey's ever-shrinking natural habitats. This prominent hillside site is characterised by undulating topography, forming a crest towards the centre with a gentle gradient down to the south and north. But simply, any development on the site will have a significantly adverse impact on the landscape character of the area, and the urban extension study endorses this. The number of dwellings proposed would clearly represent over-intensive development of the site, exacerbated by the height, bulk and close proximity of dwellings in the street scene. The overall effect will be incompatible with the scale, design and character of the established low-density housing that typifies the surrounding area. The main access to the site in Drake Avenue will have its own specific problems with the volume of traffic generated within the site, inevitably increasing congestion in a residential road already inadequate in terms of parking and passing, with a further reduction in spaces for existing residents as a result of the width of visibility sprays at the access itself. Scockles Road is critically overloaded already, as will Elm Lane become, with poor visibility on dangerous bends, narrow pinch points and inadequate speed restrictions, culminating in queues and tailbacks at the junction with the A2500 Lower Road, which is itself operating above the design capacity. The A2492 has far exceeded its design capacity and is critically congested from the island to the M2. With regard to the application site, the sheer scale of objections from local residents, and I stopped counting at 80, graphically illustrates their conviction that it will ruin their quality of life. Sorry, my awful handwriting there. Furthermore, with overwhelming pressure on a whole range of public services, from healthcare to education, on Sheppey, there's no justification for further adding to that via a spurious demand for more housing, especially since the 5-year target for new building housing on the island is approaching target. In concluding, it would be beneficial to point out that Swale Borough Council's pre-planning advice on this application is specific about the settlement strategy under policy ST3, which, quote, seeks to restrict development in the countryside unless it's able to demonstrate it would contribute to the protecting its intrinsic value, landscape setting,
Okay, that's your
tranquility and vitality.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Could I now invite Mr. Ken McNess, please, to speak on this item?
Good evening. I have been asked to speak to you today by my stepfather, Bob Cracknell, who is the landowner. He wanted to be here himself this evening, but unfortunately he cannot be given the current heatwave and the fact that he is 80 years of age. Many will know Bob as he has lived on the Isle of Sheppey since the early 1960s before moving to Sittingbourne to be closer to his family and grandchildren in 2021. Bob has previously lived at 2 addresses on Drake Avenue, building the second house he lived in there from scratch. He was also an active small business owner who ran a successful car bodywork repair shop business on the island, RW Cracknell, based in Sheerness, for 40 years. Indeed, as part of his island legacy, the company is still running with the apprentices who Bob trained from the age of 16, now owning it. Bob has been a community island stalwart for the past 6 decades, and in that time he has also undertaken masses of fundraising for the local community through his business sponsorship and hobbies. When Bob finally made the decision to sell this plot of land, he spent a great deal of time finding a Kent-based developer who would develop the site sympathetically in line with his wishes to do what is best for the residents of Minster and the island as a whole. He purposely chose not to engage with large national house builders who he knew would try and develop the site at a very high density of between 60 to 70 houses, even though that would have been more lucrative for him. He instead picked Provectus as a local Kent-based residential developer whose ethos to do what is right by residents, and as such Bob's former neighbours, resonated fully with Bob's wishes. Demonstrating that both Bob and Provectus share the same like-minded neighbourhood first philosophy and commitment to community involvement, Provectus attended a meeting with Minster Parish Council in advance of the application being submitted, which very few developers actually do. They have taken on board and acted on the advice given by the council, which includes developing at a low density 44 houses, which is not the most economically advantageous scheme for Bob, retaining the trees and hedge line along Elm Lane to minimise the visual impact for Bob's old neighbours. They've proposed ecological enhancements and landscaping on the site and provided money to enhance community facilities in Minster through the Section 106 agreement, which has been agreed in full. Approving this proposal would therefore be a fantastic example of how you can ensure the best possible outcome has been secured for the island with this land. It would demonstrate that the administration can work alongside a sympathetic developer and landowner to develop to deliver a development on the land, because that it's not of the greatest economic gain to anybody involved. It is in the best possible interests of the local community, and that's all that Bob has ever wanted. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Could I now invite Mr. Peter Rickard, please, to speak on this item?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, councillors. I'd like to start by talking about the fact that the planning summary in your bundle on page 205 does not actually broadly pick up all of the concerns that were raised. A concern has been raised around a planning assumption being incorrect. The planning assumption and responses were based on an equal amount of 2 and 3 bedroom house at 2.4 occupancy, not the actual planning assumption that you have presented in front of you here around the 2, 3 and the 4 bedroom properties. I'd also like to point out that on page 212 and 213, there is no reference to the number of accidents, injuries or deaths on Suckle Road or Lower Road. Obviously, this information is available and I cannot understand why it's not been taken into account in terms of this development. I think you'll find it actually says that your report actually says that Sockles Road will take the majority of traffic and is a road built to a good standard supporting considerable volume of new development. I'd like to remind you it's currently closed for 10 weeks. Furthermore, Appendix A, page 236 states that development will generate only 23 vehicle movements both day and night. Is that really what we believe from 44 properties? I'd also then like to move on to 10.43, page 80, which my point around this is page 83 of the National Risk Register around major fire. It talks about an emergency pedestrian access on Elm Lane. There's no reference to the width for that road. That road is actually less than 3 metres. So I'm not sure under approved document B how you can actually say that that's an emergency vehicle. I understand that the Kent Fire and Rescue Service is not a statutory consultee here. However, you will not get a large emergency fire engine down that road as an emergency vehicle, and that is a risk that you will have to take into consideration and how you plan against that risk. I'd also like to point out that 10.44 states that Drake Avenue is 5.6 metres wide. It's not actually true. It's 5.1 metres wide, and the report does not say whether that's curb to curb. I'd also like to point out that obviously Southern Water had an 18-inch burst main that failed due to an increase in demand. Our own MP has called for a second main to be put onto the island. I'd also like to point out that Southern Water did a desktop review in terms of foul water, and no physical site survey has been conducted around foul water, and we know that the area is acceptable to surface water flooding. The point around the bats on page 199 of your report is simply untrue. There are 2 back boxes, and I'm not sure how this committee can assure itself that it's taken into consideration people with protected characteristics under the Equalities Act, because there is a number of disabled people and elderly people in Drake Avenue. I'm not sure how you can take that into account and demonstrate that as a committee, because there's no reference to it in the planning assessment. I could go on to point out around the National Risk Register and flooding.
Okay, that's your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Could I now invite Mr. Andrew Street, please, to speak on this item?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for allowing me to speak this evening. I'm speaking in support of this application for Perfectus Holdings Limited, a Kent-based property development company. This proposal is an outline application for 44 dwellings in a highly sustainable location on the edge of Minster. The highway access which is for approval at this stage will be from Drake Avenue. Prior to submitting this application, we undertook extensive pre-application consultation with both the local authority and the parish council. The parish council welcomed the applicant speaking to them in advance of the submission. We have taken on board all of the advice provided by the local planning authority in the pre-application stage and have worked with the council's planning officers throughout the determination of this application. In line with the advice provided with the council, the proposal has retained the hedge line along Elm Lane by creating a new vehicle access onto Drake Avenue. The highway access has been assessed and has taken into consideration to be acceptable by Kent Highways and also by the council's own highway consultant. The independent highway assessments have also confirmed there is no cumulative impact arising from this proposal on the local highway network. In terms of landscape, we have demonstrated there is no landscape impact arising from the scheme, unlike the other schemes currently being promoted in the Minster area referred to in this report. The visual effects of the proposal can be mitigated through careful management of the boundary landscaping, in particular along the southern boundary of the site. The proposal will make development contributions of approximately £600,000 to the local community for schools, community services, social care, the NHS and highway development works. This will be achieved through the Section 106 legal agreement. In addition, there will be no harm arising on the neighbouring properties on Drake Avenue. In summary, this proposal is a low-density 44 dwelling scheme in a highly sustainable location. As the report states, the site is previously developed land, it's paddock land. The highway access is deemed to be acceptable not only by Kent Highways, but by the council's own external consultant. We can achieve net biodiversity gain on the site. We can confirm the requested 106 monies will be paid in full, and this has been confirmed in writing to the local authority. There's no landscape impact arising from the proposal, and we retain the existing trees and hedge line along Elm Lane. We ask that this proposal, recommended for approval by the Head of Planning Services this evening, meets with your approval this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Could I now invite Ward Member Councillor Pete Neal to speak on this item, please?
Thank you very much, Chair. I'd just like to start off by saying that it's pronounced Scockles Road, and there was never a train station on this site. The train station was the other side of Scockles Road, which has already been developed upon. I'd like to touch on the wastewater concerns I have for this site. Southern Water have already said that they're almost up to capacity with their wastewater drainage. And I also called into question their ability to supply fresh water to the island in recent events. Traffic congestion is going to cost, as it was already mentioned by the gentleman back there, there's going to be many more movement of traffic than the already sort of the stated figures earlier on. I just can't see that at all. With these amount of dwellings, the amount of traffic backwards and forward, especially at peak times for school runs, etc. And also the getting into the environmental bit. I mean, I used to go along there as a lad and catch many a slow worm and a lizard and things like that. So all of those reptile life is going to be destroyed along that way. The roads, Scockles Road itself is not a particularly wide road. It's quite twisty, especially when you get round to the junction with Scockles Road and Elm Lane. That's quite a nasty little corner to come round. And the traffic impact for the rest of the island, we're already seeing with that small stretch of Scockles Road being shut, the weight that now puts across down onto Minster Broadway and down Minster Road and into Barton's Hill, it's already massively congested with just that short stretch of that road being congested. If there's an accident or anything down there, then you're going to have the same sort of thing again. It's the same thing with the island, time and time again. You get the houses getting built up, but nothing for the road. There's only 3 major road routes on the island, and we've seen that on many a time before. When any one of those is shut down, the island is almost gridlocked. Building another stretch, I grant it's only a few houses, but then you've got the slips on top of that to one side. You've got the potential to develop the other side of it again. You've got the land north of Nelson as well, and west of Elm Lane. The cumulative effect of that, finding that this is just not much of a development, but you take that, the rest of those small developments in the round, that comes to quite a sizable development then. Those roads down there were never ever designed for that sort of traffic. And I think I'll just leave it there.
Okay. Thank you. I'm glad you said that. So me cutting you off. Can I now invite Councillor Peter MacDonald, please, to speak on this item as a ward member.
very much, Chair. Some members may remember that Scockles Road many years ago was actually going to be closed at its junction with the A2500. That was when the Thistle Hill development was given planning because that was going to be the route. But because the planners or whoever, County Highways, didn't get it right, the road system was inadequate, so they've had to leave Scockles Road open. I can assure you there are accidents at the junction of Scockles Road and the Lower Road. I did some calculations. It's not particularly about this site, but any site east of Cowsted is grossly overloaded. The road, the design capacity, I do have a Master of Science degree in Transport Policy Planning and Operations, and the road capacity for a two-lane road is 13,000 vehicles a day. Well, the extrapolated numbers, and I've been very, very careful not to over-egg the pudding, brings it up to 19,000. So that's grossly overloaded already, apart from the other instructions. So any site that hasn't got planning, we've still got another 2,500 planning on the Thistle Hill and that block, and the one on the bottom of Button Hill Drive. So, you know, that's going to make it even worse. Apart from the traffic, obviously somebody's mentioned about health. We all know that the one of the health centres was actually shut by the community, the clinical commissioning group, and so now it's almost impossible to get any GP thing. Education, there's 1,700 children bussed off the island every day because the schools, there used to be 4 schools, 4 secondary schools, and effectively there's 1. Employment, there's no employment, so people have to travel off. As you know, people commute over to Sittingbourne sometimes and then away from there. But the main thing is the road usage, and there can be no justification for any further greenfield sites east of Cowsted Corner, because it is grossly overloaded already, and we know, slight accident and the whole place is gridlocked. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you very much. I now move the officer recommendation. Could I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Jays. And would you like to speak first as board member?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to clear up some of the things in the case officer's update. This site is not adjacent to the slips. There is as you can see, there is a paddock between it. It's not going to be £6 million in 106 money. It's 600,000. As been said, it's Scockles Road, and Elm Lane, not Elms Lane. There was emphasis on the lack of 5-year supply. However, in the Jubilee Fields appeal, the planning inspector said on a 4.6 to a 4-year supply, the shortfall is therefore of concern, but cannot be said to be acute. I'd like to thank the Parish Council for rescheduling their scheduled meeting tonight to be here to speak on this. I called this application in and the Parish Council called it following. I know there was an update on that. I haven't seen table, and it's very short and not to the point update. On 1.2, it says the site is used as paddock land. It was paddock land until the occupants were kicked off. It's now been returned to the wild, as we'll probably see on the site visit. We've mentioned healthcare. We have in Kent the worst patient to doctor ratio nationally. We used to have it when we was the Swale CCG. We was then put into Kent Medway CCG, and we now drag down the rest of Kent. Has been updated by the officer. Arriva no longer service staff, and nor have they done so since June last year. I went to the site today, or near the site, to the bus stop to look at Chalkwell services. Chalkwell served this site
with 4 buses, 2 at each stop. One goes at 7:50 in the morning to Sheerness, and one goes at 12 minutes past 1 to Walden. And at the other bus stop, it goes to Queenborough at 11 minutes past 10, and then to Laysdown at 3:30. I don't know how. I don't know how sustainable it is to have buses that only run twice a day from each stop. It mentions Travel Master. They only serve the school community, not the wider general public. I think the site history is important, and paragraph 189 and 190 of the NPPF should be looked further into, on the fact that the railway tracks, it says they remain there. They're still present on the northern boundary. This is the island's history, and I wouldn't like to see it lost. There's no safe footpath or complete footpath to walk to either of the schools mentioned on page 190. Scockles Road has a limited footpath, less than the width of the average wheelchair. There is no, you have to swap from east to west sides, and there is no drop curb to do so. I don't see how it's sustainable for wheelchair users, parents with buggies, anyone that uses wheels really. And there's no footpath up Elm Lane. So again, to St George's School is not very sustainable. Mentions on page 193 about air quality, climate change, historical environment, natural environment, sports and recreational facilities. I don't think there's enough in this report regarding them. On page 194, it mentions policy ST1. ST1, it mentions improving the role of Sheerness as the island's main centre. I don't see how this application does that. In the local plan, in section 4.2.18, page 39, the water companies say they'll be able to supply new houses. Last week, they failed again to supply 24,000 homes. Again, policy CP8 mentions conserving and enhancing the historical environment. Again, I don't think that is mentioned enough in this report. DM21 mentions water. Well, I've already just mentioned that. And it mentions, where necessary, there needs to be a demonstration that adequate water supply is in place. Well, it wasn't last week. DM26, it astonishes me that lanes around this development aren't classed as rural lanes in the last local plan. DM27 mentions the grazing and horses, and I don't think there's enough mention of that. One question for the officer: why is there no response from KCC Archaeological, considering it is a historical site? We then move on to developers' contributions. It mentions money for primary schools in Rushden and Queenborough. Well, that's not very sustainable to this site. It also then mentions 2 off-island schools. Again, that doesn't sound very sustainable to have to travel off-island for education. With the youth services, it says about contributions will be spent locally. I'd like to see that narrowed down to spent on the island. We move on to highways contributions. We've seen the total lack of bus services that either don't run, and there's 4 buses to 2 stops a day. Rather than fix the problems that's going to be caused on the roads, just give us some money and we'll ignore them, is what KCC's response is. I'd also like to ask a question on the other Elm Lane application. There's mention of SEND school money, but there isn't on here. So is there a tipping point where the development starts paying SEND money? On page 198, it mentions the 2019 NPPF. Obviously, we have the updated version, the 2021 version. As the resident that spoke against this said, there's been lots of crashes. Just on Minster Road, there's been 26 crashes in the last year. As Councillor McDonald said, he's sure that there was crashes at the Scockles to Lower Road junction. Again, there's been 7 in the last 5 years. On the Lower Road between Cowsley Corner and Scockles alone, there's been 32 crashes in the last 5 years. I think and I think members have done Southern Water to death here. So, but I think, in fact, let's have one last dig off. So they've done the desktop survey. On page 202, it mentions additional flow may lead to an increased risk of foul water flooding from the sewer network. Any network reinforcement that is deemed necessary to mitigate this will be provided by Southern Water. I won't hold my breath. There's no response from the Green Spaces manager, and I wonder why this is. I think Play has it not reached a point where he needs to respond to this? And I noticed he hasn't responded on the second application. Was Historical England consulted? Obviously, it's a historical site. I noticed on the other realm application, Highways England have commented, but they haven't commented on this. Again, is there a tipping point? On the planning portal, there is a SLAR assessment, which isn't for this site, it's for the site next door. Again, there's no comment from the climate change officer. On page 205, it mentions traffic impact and it mentions Scockles Road, but I know members of the public mentioned Lower Road. And again, I bring to attention the lack of GP surgery capacity. It mentions the site is within close walking distance of service and public transport. Again, 4 buses a day, footpaths that aren't wide enough. Even in Minster's High Street, footpaths are even narrower than they are on Scockles Road. How can this be considered a sustainable location? On page 208, 10.10, it mentions related to heritage assets. How closely was this looked into? Paragraph on page 211, it mentions on section 10.39, it mentions paragraph 111 of the MPPFF sets out that development should only be refused on highway grounds when an unacceptable impact on the highway. Paragraph 92 promotes healthy inclusion and safe places for a number of measures, including streets are designed to allow easy pedestrian and cycling connection with and between neighbourhoods. And this is emphasised in paragraph 104. Was the active travel coordinator asked to comment on this application?
Okay, are you able to paraphrase any of the remainder?
I only have 4 more pages, Chair, before I'm asked for a site visit.
4 more comments.
I will cut down. I'll skip some pages just to save time. There's more mention of bus services. Again, there's not enough mention of air quality and climate change and active travel in this. I'd ask for a site visit. I'd ask for a site visit and a recorded vote on the site visit. I hope I can have a second on that. Thank you, Chair.
We have a seconder for a site visit. Councillor Darby, thank you. Those in favour of a site visit? Okay, Councillor Beard.
4.
Councillor Darby.
4.
Councillor Eakin.
4.
Councillor Gibson. 4. Councillor Hall.
Members have taken into consideration that recent site visits are very poor attendance. I think it's unfair to the community and it's unfair to the rest of the members that go to site meetings. There's only 4 turned up last week.
And you were another.
We need to know, who's coming and who's not coming. Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Hunt. Councillor Jackson.
4.
Councillor Jays. Councillor Marchington. Councillor Martin.
Against.
Councillor Rolls.
4.
Councillor Simmons.
Against.
Councillor Stephen. Councillor Valentine.
Against.
No, Councillor Winkless.
4.
And Councillor Perkin.
4.
Thank you. That's 12 for and 4 against, so it's deferred for a planning working group meeting. Councillor Martin.
Could I request that the planning working group occur on a Sunday afternoon then, Chair, so those of us that work can attend?
Okay, yeah. The thing is, we're never going to catch everybody all the time, but it's just the way it is.
It's simply the fact, Chair, that for many of us in this room, it's now completely impossible unless we are going to move to having them on a weekend. Alternatively, pay me a day's wages and I'll get the day off work. And I'm sure that would be the case for other members of this committee too.
That also doesn't preclude you from going out and viewing the site as an individual.
It doesn't, Chair, but we're also going to consistently get this position whereby members will go, only 4 turned up, but then I know there are other members in this room that also have to work for a living.
Of course I do, yeah.
And, you know, we're going to be criticised consistently for that. So unless we want to have a less diverse council, which is full to the brim of people who are retired or have the money to afford not to work, we're going to have to change the way we work.
Thank you. No. Okay, right, we'll leave it there. Thank you. Councillor Valentine, briefly.
Could we at least avoid Monday morning? There's an administrative meeting every Monday morning.
Yes, okay. Councillor Hunt.
I don't care when you do the site meeting for. But can we just have the officers? Why are we actually going for a site visit? We've not heard anything of what we're actually looking at, and is there any feedback for officers? And
well, I think if you listen to
I heard
the monologue.
All my questions are now recorded for a response at the next meeting.
Sir, as the head of planning asked, please can you put them in writing so they can be included in this report, in the next report. Then we can respond in advance of the site visit. I can apply to some of the technical questions that were asked. No, there are no heritage assets on the site, and so English heritage are not.
Thank you, Councillor Beard.
You did send out an email, Mr. Chairman, reminding members that they're supposed to ask questions by the Monday before the meeting.
Thank you. I'm glad you at least read it. No, we haven't seen my stern yet. Trust me. Okay, so members, what I'm going to briefly do now, we've had quite a long session. I'm just going to call it a 5-minute adjournment for a comfort break. And when we come back in, we're going to move to 3.2, which is the other application on Elm Lane. Thank you. Okay, members, can we get back together, please? Oh, yeah, very nice. Don't get your hair stuck in there, Jim. Members, just as a reminder then, we're going to start with item 3.2. And so hopefully the officer got that as well. And item 3.2 is land west of Elm Lane, Minster. And the reference number is 20/504408/out. And I'll thank the officer for an outline and any updates, please. And just to remind members that this one's already gone for non-determination. And it might be useful at this point to say that there's certainly been some press releases that have been highly critical of officers in not determining it, which is not the case. It hasn't been an issue for the officers. The situation has been that the officers haven't had the information coming back that they'd requested, is my understanding. And I'm sure our head of planning would correct me if I'm wrong there, but that's my understanding. So it's been extremely unfair. And hopefully we'll be writing to the media concerned and asking for a retraction, because it is grossly unfair. Okay, Mr. Webster, are you ready?
Yeah, okay. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear, thank you.
Okay, I've tried to share the screen. I've shared the parameter plan on the screen. Has that come up?
Yes, we're just having a little bit of it's in the background of them. We can't see it because we've got the main screen in the chamber on.
I'll try and share it again.
Yeah, we need to minimize the chamber screen. Right, could you try now, Mr. Webster, with your screen? Yes, that's fine. Thank you.
Is that good? Okay, thanks. Right, okay, yeah, I'm Tom Webster. I'm the case officer, the current case officer's application. Okay, the proposal seeks outline consent for up to 100 residential units on this site with a new entrance point on Elm Lane. The proposal would also result in a diversion of a public footpath which currently runs through the centre of the site. The Bill site, which sits outside the boundary of Minster, is rural in nature. At 6.4 hectares in size, it forms a large expanse of agricultural land with a relatively steep gradient. It's surrounded by green fields, giving a sense of rural countryside. The public footpath provides long and short views of the surrounding countryside, stretching as far as the mainland. There are also views of the site from the mainland and over the bridge to the island. Although the council does not currently have a 5-year housing land supply, albeit it's only marginally short at 4.8 years, in my opinion, the material harm caused by the scheme significantly and demonstrably outweighs the benefits of the proposal. I'm the third case officer to deal with the application. All three of us visited the site, and each of us reached independently the same conclusion, which is that it would be a great shame to lose such a vital piece of rural landscape. The proposal would result in the urbanisation of attractive rural rolling countryside, irrevocably alter its character to its detriment, and would amount to short-term gain, with the price being harm that is permanent and enduring. For these reasons, as well as the absence of a legal agreement to secure critical developer contributions, which are needed to mitigate its own impacts on the surrounding infrastructure, and I respectfully request that you support my suggested reasons for refusal. And on that, actually, please note, we're now only seeking 2 reasons for refusal and not 1. The Environment Health Officer today has withdrawn her reason for refusal for air quality, as she feels it can be dealt with by condition in the event of an approval. The first, also, you will note on the update sheet, the table update, that revised rephrased the word for reason for refusal 1 to make it more precise and to reinforce the point of the harm to the landscape. And a further update, because my colleague mentioned earlier on his scheme, on the scheme land north of Elm Lane, we both received an objection letter today from a neighbour who lives on Elm Lane, and there's obviously been some of the roads been blocked, and he's concerned, and I share his concern actually, that Elm Lane is very rural in character. It's a lane, really, not a road, and he's concerned that this road's not fit for purpose in terms of traffic and congestion. I don't necessarily agree with that point, but I certainly agree that it's a rural lane and character, and that forms part of my reason for refusal or recommendation for refusal. And that's it for the moment, but happy to comment if you have any questions. Actually, would it be helpful if I shared some photos as well to put the site into context a bit more?
Yes, it would be, yeah, thank you.
Okay. Okay, yes, this is this photo is taken from the entrance to Elm Lane via Elm Lane. So entrance to the Peel site via Elm Lane, and it's looking over the access point to the public right of way. And this is a view of the site onto Elm Lane, which shows some mature hedging views of a kind of countryside setting. Again, this is a view looking northwards from the site. So this is on the Peel site, and on the right hand side you'll see the boundary line shared with Elm Lane, and looking north you see this the back the trees screening the school, so the farm buildings beyond, and other green fields. Again, it's very rural setting, I think. And this is the other side of Elm Lane, again showing the kind of broader countryside of the area. And this is in the centre of the site, again showing other neighbouring fields, which to my mind is not a backland development. This is a very attractive rural landscape. Okay, I'll stop then. I shall leave you a moment.
Thank you. Can I now invite Parish Councillor White, please, to speak on this item?
Good evening, members. Thank you very much for listening to my statement this evening. I've got a change to it, so I'll just read you out input from one of the residents that is in the area. Once again, an incident on a lower road this evening at East Church has caused chaos, not only to those stuck in traffic, but all those businesses at Browndown Farm Shop, as traffic could not get through and was turned down Scockles Road, which is closed, causing lorries, vehicles down Elm Lane. Keep building, that will solve the problems. So I feel that residents' views are extremely relevant to this planning application, and I'm pleased and grateful that we've managed to find residents that have come forward this evening. Sorry about that little divergence, but I'll get on with my statement right now. Good evening, members, officers, but mostly residents here. Welcome and thank you for joining us if you're virtual as well. There's been exceptional interest in both planning applications attached to Minster this evening. Before I begin, I wanted to highlight the work of the planning officer allocated to this application, in that his report was excellent and is a good reflection of what this council is capable of. I hope this standard is consistently shown in applications going forward, and as a parish we stand ready to support officers if needed in this endeavour. Minster Parish Council has registered the strongest possible objection, and so have over 170 residents from the area, and only in my small amount of experience as parish councillor, that's the highest neighbour response that we've ever seen, and more power to them. Good. We are gathering pace for public engagement in the process, and we will push this for maximum engagement so the process can best represent what the public need and what they want it to represent. I'd like to take a moment to reiterate some of the strong points from the Parish Council's response, and then to go on to look at some of the points brought out in the Planning Officer's report on the application. Minster is the largest settlement on the Isle of Sheppey and now the third largest in Swale. Sprawling housing developments have already been imprinted on the area, which have led to social problems that have meant inappropriate use of community resources that could have been solved through a much better approach to planning and community engagement in the first place. Kent Police and KCC children's officers have had to target the area, and both of these organisations have got limited resources at best. The proposed application site has been highlighted by both parish and planning officer as being outside the permitted area of development within the adopted Swale Local Plan 2017. If this development goes ahead, then really what is the point of having this local plan approach at all? The application itself allows for 35% affordable housing provision. This is in itself unacceptable, especially as Swale's own data provided by councillors show that now.
Thank you very much. Your time is up, Councillor White. Thank you.
Housing benefits. Sorry.
Thank you. And could you take back my thanks as well to Minster Parish Council for cancelling their meeting this evening and showing up, both yourself and John earlier. Thank you. Could I now invite Mr. Lee Jarman, please, to speak on this one? I hope I pronounced your name correctly.
Good evening. My name is Lee Jarmain. I live in Nelson Avenue, Minster Sheppey, and I would like to strongly object on behalf of myself and the residents on this planning application. Our infrastructure is broken and will continue to crumble like our water pipes, as we've seen recently, until we stop and put it right. Our schools, doctors, roads and transport systems are far from adequate, being oversubscribed, overburdened and no longer effective in supporting the health and well-being of the residents. This development, if allowed to go ahead, would add further pressure from the increase in the properties and the additional residents that this development would bring. Overlooking loss of privacy, this would be the case for all existing residents in Nelson Avenue, presently back onto the green space site where the proposed application has been made. Highway safety will significantly increase traffic on our narrow lane and surrounding roads, raising the risk to injury to walkers, cyclists and horse riders. Traffic, already a major issue on and off Sheppey, along with the congestion on our single carriageway and surrounding roads. The new Barton Hill roundabout is already overburdened. Accidents and burst water mains already bring the entire island into gridlock. Couple this with the planned and unplanned works, commuting and life here is becoming intolerable. Air quality, residents also have air quality concerns, as it is important to consider whether air quality is an issue before any neighbourhood development applications. Has testing for particulate matter PM10 and PM2.5 and nitrogen dioxide NO2 been carried out in the area? And if so, what are they? This application would significantly increase carbon emissions in the area even further. Noise would increase significantly, in particular from the higher elevation over existing neighbourhood. Layout and density of building. Density in this area has already been significantly increased from recent developments. This application, with other developments that would surely follow, will raise the density levels above and beyond what anyone could consider suitable for this village area. Nature conservation as an area of beauty and abundance of wildlife, this would have a negative impact on wildlife, destroying much of their habitat and biodiversity, including but not limited to bats that would adversely be affected at best by this development, if not lost altogether. It's difficult to put and find words to express enough the anger and frustration that this application and others are having on the residents on Sheppey, along with the sadness and dismay of seeing our beautiful green spaces on Sheppey destroyed and buried beneath the bricks and mortar forever. I implore all of you in the strongest way possible to support our objections by rejecting this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now move the officer recommendation. Could I have a seconder, please? One second. I've got members that wish to speak. I was getting a little ahead of myself there. So, and Councillor Ingleton, I'll make sure you get in this time. Apologies. First then, Councillor Ingleton.
Thank you, Chairman. The area that concerns us was used, in fact, during the Crimean War for accommodating soldiers on their way to the continent. It was also used again during World War I, and they left many wooden buildings which have consequently been converted into Drake and Nelson Avenue. The site is not near the Minster local centre. I'm at a bit of a loss, living in the middle of Minster, as to where the centre is, because we don't actually have one. We have a number of shops scattered around the area, but there is no real centre of Minster due to very poor planning in the past. The access to the shops is difficult unless you're a car owner. There is, we've heard already, there's very limited bus routes, and many roads in that area have no footpaths. In fact, with the increase in population from just over 1,000 after the war to 17,000 now, the number of roads that have been built since then are only the ones on the estates. The National Planning Policy Framework gives a clear reason for refusal, as any adverse impacts that would outweigh the benefits of the development. And I think this is something that we need to be looking seriously. The road network is mainly single lane or narrow lanes. It's nice having a wide access onto Elm Lane, but as you've already heard, it's only, or it's less than 3 metres wide. Kent Highways have admitted that many of the roads are over capacity. All of them are over capacity. We're seeing regularly on a daily basis collisions between vehicles. Last night coming over here, I passed one. There was another one further along the road this evening. Southern Water have admitted that their drainage network is not sufficient. We haven't got a date for them to upgrade it. School pupils are transported daily to Sittingbourne. Section 106 payments will only benefit the local library by providing a few books. None of the rest of the money comes to Minster.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Neil.
Thank you very much, Chair. As already been said, this is in a rural area, currently undeveloped. It's just another chipping away of the green spaces on the island. the way that the traffic would come out of this development as well into Elm Lane, I note that it is, the proposal is to widen that little small section of Elm Lane, but that's going to destroy the hedgerows that are already there now, and then would naturally send most of the traffic out of the site down to the right, which then would again increase the traffic flow down Drake and Nelson Avenue. We were just discussing earlier the other development that's going to be coming along north of Elm Lane. That will just add on to those traffics as well. And if you turn right out of that, out of this development, left, sorry, you'll then go into a very narrow lane that comes all the way up to Minster one way, and then you could also get into Elm Lane going the other way down to Scockles Road, but that's only a single track road with only about 3 vehicle points to pass. So you're going to, yeah, that's just going to snarl up down there. And then again, it comes back to quite a lot of things about GP coverage on the island. As has already been mentioned, it's already the worst in the country. And also the commuting to get off the island to get to, if you're lucky enough to get a GP appointment and you get a referral, then you've got to travel all the way up to Medway Maritime, which is already under stress, as it's been, you know, noted in the national press. And the travelling times, and with the extra parking and congestion, travelling times for ambulances and police, most of which now come from off the island to events. The only emergency service that has a regular presence on the island is the fire brigade, and they drive around in there, and they do quite a lot of work, first responding work, for the ambulance service now, because the ambulance service are regularly nowhere to be found on the island. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor MacDonald, did you wish to speak on this, or? Okay, thank you. I just want to afford you that opportunity as you did register. Thank you. Okay, I'll move the officer recommendation.
Happy to second again.
Thank you, Councillor Jays. Would you like to speak on it?
Yeah, members will be pleased to know I don't have a monologue on this one. I highlighted very little in this report. I think it's a very well written report. I fully support the case officer and what he says. I'm surprised with KCC on page 307 saying that there's no more than 6 cars in a queue at any one time. I find this laughable at rush hour and school run times. Again, the Green Space Officer hasn't commented. I don't know if that's crucial to the appeal, but whether his response is needed. I would call for a site visit because members of the public asked for one, but I think as all comments were against the application, and the application, that is what this case officer recommending, and the fact that if we do have a site visit, there's 11 days to have a site visit and for the case officer to submit the council statement for appeal, so it's not viable. I fully support the case officer on this, and I will vote for the recommendation.
Thank you. So Martin, please.
It would be amiss not to mention the fact that this is probably the first application in the last 3 years on Sheppey to include the potential for affordable housing. However, as much as that would be a huge benefit for people on the island, it certainly doesn't outweigh the harm involved on this application. So with great regret at turning down the potential for 35 affordable dwellings on the Isle of Sheppey where they are desperately needed, I'll be supporting the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Hunt.
Thanks, Chair. I just want to comment on the good report as well, but just say that I think we heard, I think the parish council said about the officers have done a good report, but I think that's just because the recommendation is that what they are wanting to hear. I mean, if every single application report that we have is a good report, and the officers base it on all those policy requirements and come up with their conclusion, whether it's for or against the development. But the officer in this case has obviously come up with its reason for refusal, and fully support that.
Thank you. Okay, you don't see anybody else indicating, members? Oh, Councillor Perkin.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to also commend the report, but especially because it's an area of interest for me, support the comments around the archaeological remains that are potentially at the site. I think that if it goes to appeal and is granted approval, that a condition would be for field work would be really important in that site.
Okay, can I take a view? It's not within our gift. Oh, sorry, would you like to?
I was just commending what the KCC archaeological officer had said, because I appreciate it's not within our gift, but if he is saying that, that's good.
Yeah, we could always ask for such a condition to be imposed, but it's entirely within the gift of the inspector because this is an appeal that we're talking about. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Marchington.
Yes, thank you, Chair. When this came up before, one of the main problems I had with it was the access onto Scockles Road, because you had, although those pavements on the access road into the site, the actual Scockles Road, there was no footpath on either side of the road, and there's only just room for two cars to pass each other. It really is tight. And if you turn up to Westminster Village where you expect people to walk to, the footpath starts about 60 metres further on the other side of the road. So you're forcing groups of children in the evening to have to walk along the side of the road, which is very narrow, and have to cross the road to the path. And that was one of the things I found was very dangerous. And I still, unless they widen the road or do something, I still find that a pinch point that's leading to disaster.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Jones.
Could I ask for a recorded vote, please, Chair? I know you've run out of paper, but I'm sure you can do it on your hand.
Fortunately, I just happened to have anticipation was always 90% of the job in the fire service. Thank you. So Councillor Beard.
For.
Councillor Darby. Yeah, for the officer's recommendation to refuse, just so that everybody's clear on that, or would have been refused had we been able to determine it. That's what we're saying. Thank you. Councillor Eakin.
For.
Myself, 4. Councillor Hall. Councillor Hunt. Councillor Jackson.
4.
Councillor Jays. Councillor Marchington. Councillor Martin. Councillor Rolls.
4.
Councillor Simmons. 4. Councillor Stephen. Councillor Valentine. 4. Councillor Winkless.
4.
And Councillor Perkin.
4.
Members, that's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. Right, can I take us all the way back now, please, to item 2.2. And this one is 22/501/594 full, and it's 8 Park Road, Faversham. Thank the officer for an outline and any update, please.
Thank you, Chair. This application is brought to committee because Faversham Town Council has raised objections to this.
Sorry, could I just ask you to speak a bit closer to your mic? Not quite picking you up. Sorry, thank you.
Okay, so this application is brought to the committee because Faversham Town Council has raised objection to it. The site lies in the Faversham Conservation Area, where an Article 4 direction order applies to the front elevations of buildings. The application property is a 2-storey Victorian semi-detached house. Like many Victorian houses of this type, the property has an original 2-storey outshoot extending partway across the rear elevation.
The application seeks retrospective planning permission to retain a 3.05 metre deep lean-to style single-storey extension, infilling the space between the property's two-storey outshoot and the boundary with the adjoining property number 9. 2 letters of representation have been received, one from the adjoining half of the pair, the other supporting the proposal. As the report says, there are 3 main issues to be considered. Firstly, design and appearance, which officers judge to be acceptable. The proposal would be a lean-to tiled roof design, which complies with the council's SPG guidance and would relates satisfactorily to the property. The depth of the extension is slightly greater than the 3 metre limit in the council's SPG, but only by 5 centimetres, which is considered to be fairly minimal. Next main issue is residential amenity. The only neighbour affected is the adjoining property number 9. The main window affected is a dining room window in the rear main wall of the property. This is very deeply recessed because of the 2-storey outshoots that these buildings have. Some further loss of aspect and light enjoyed has inevitably happened, but rooms in this position only ever have limited aspect and are never well lit. Officers take the view that the further loss of amenity is not beyond the acceptable tolerance in this type of situation. Final issue is the conservation area. The council has a legal duty to consider if any proposal would preserve and enhance the character and appearance of a conservation area. The view here is that the proposal, the extension, that because it's already been built, is at the rear of the property and would only be glimpsed publicly from the side road, which is called Chapel Street. The application property is the second property in from Chapel Street, so it is not prominent. The view of the council's conservation officer is that the Chapel Street scene would not be harmed, and the proposal would overall be neutral in its impact. Why are my pictures not coming up? Right. Right. Well,
sorry, can I just, have you got any graphics on it?
I'm just looking. Here we are. Right. Why is this not showing? Pictures are on my screen, but they're not up here.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, sorry, if you click that arrow.
Oh.
Yeah. Click share. Screen.
Right.
There should be. There.
Are they coming?
Thank you.
Right. Yes, life's a bit simpler now by looking at the picture. Right. This is a view. The left-hand picture is the view of the back of the property. This is the existing situation. Here, on the right-hand side, we have the flank wall of the extension, which is the subject of the application. The neighbour's window, this is number 9. The neighbour's window that is most affected is this window here, which serves a small dining room. Just out of the picture, or you can see it, both properties have these 2-storey outshoots. You can just see the edge of the one here for number 9. The application property has one which is just off the view here. These sorts of extensions always have quite a profound effect, but as I said a moment ago, they never have these windows never have very good aspect anyway. So the judgment call in each case is whether or not a proposal would so impact on that on the affected property as to be unacceptable. Officers take the view that that wouldn't be the case here. This room runs into a dining room which extends to the front of the property. It gets some borrowed light from the from the lounge at the front. And it's, you know, we've stood in the room concerned. It's not too badly lit, and this is what is shown in the right-hand picture. We're actually stood in the room, which is served by that window. This was about middle of the afternoon. It wasn't too badly affected, we didn't think. Obviously, there is a flank wall for the extension in clear view. We can't deny that that does affect aspect. But just, you know, before this had been built, there is a 2-story outshoot just out of the view here, and that would have had quite a profound impact anyway. So we take the view that this wouldn't be so affected that we could justify refusal on residential amenity grounds.
Okay, thank you very much.
Right. It's worth looking at this picture because the parish council has raised objection to harm on grounds of harm to the conservation area. What they mean is it would look, they're not happy with the appearance in the side street, which is here, Chapel Street. The application property is the second property in, and you can just about glimpse the top part of the extension. But we take the view that that visibility in the street is really very slight, and the conservation officer as well also takes the view that the impact in the conservation area more generally would be within acceptable tolerances. So I think you've seen the photos we've got here. That's the rear elevation. This is the original 2-story outshoot. The property has had a little lean-to added at some point, and this is the view back to the rear elevation. This is the extension which we're considering here. This is the side view of the extension from the adjoining property. Nothing much more to say about that, I don't think, beyond what I've already just said.
Okay, thank you. Could I now invite Town Councillor Martin to speak on this item? You can do it from where you are.
Thank you, Chair and Committee. And as I say, I'm talking on behalf of the Town Council. As you've heard, the reason that the Town Council objected is the effect on the streetscape from Chapel Street and the conservation area harm. The primary thought process there, actually, if you look at that particular image, the one on the right, you'll notice that that is actually a temporary gate that is significantly taller than the normal gate that is there. You can see the top layer of breeze blocks as you're walking on what is a major thoroughfare used to get to the recreation ground by most people from the town centre area. It is a hideous breeze block wall, and had it come forward as an application with materials of a similar nature, I'm sure that the town council colleagues would have probably had no problem with it. But because of the materials utilised and the fact that they're not the most attractive, it was felt that there was a degree of harm. Whether that's sufficient for the committee to refuse the application is a matter for the committee to consider. I would suggest, however, that perhaps some mitigation could have been had. However, as we can see in the report that the officers have produced, it's gone over the boundary into next door's property, so you can't even use planting to try and soften the blow. I will leave it there because I know everyone's going to want to get home and someone's going to have to call for a thing in a minute, and I'll leave the room. Thank you.
Thank you. Just while Councillor Martin is leaving, can I seek your indulgence, please, to extend standing orders, members, at this point? Thank you. Okay, could I now invite Kate Holland, please, to speak on this item?
Good evening, members. My name is Kate Holland of Invicta Planning, and I'm here to speak on behalf of the applicants, Mr. and Mrs. Rosemer, who own number 8 Park Road. The application relates to the construction of a single-storey rear extension and has been submitted retrospectively as the extension was constructed between 2018 and 2019. The extension was built in such a way to allow the adjoining neighbours at 9 Park Road to also construct an extension which would join to the side wall sitting along the boundary, albeit the neighbours have not done so to date. The extension is substantially in accordance with the Council's supplementary guidance for designing extensions. It projects 3.05 metres from the rear wall of the original property, infilling the space between the original rear projection and the boundary. It is modest in scale and the materials used are sensitive both to the original property and the conservation area. It is acknowledged that the side facing 9 Park Road has not been rendered and the applicant is willing to accept a condition to require them to undertake those works. The only reasons this extension requires planning permission is the location of the property within the conservation area and also the minor projection 5 centimetres beyond the usually allowed permitted development rights. Both the Council's SPG in relation to extensions and household permitted development rights therefore in principle support the type and scale of extension constructed at 8 Park Road. Limitations on permitted development rights for extensions in conservation areas are imposed to ensure the local planning authorities are able to consider the impact of development on the conservation area. The extension is located to the rear of the property and is not highly prominent within the conservation area, only visible across rear gardens from Chapel Street. The rear elevation of properties fronting onto Park Road are not important features of the conservation area. The extension has been appropriately and sensitively designed to sit in its context and would not cause harm to the character and appearance of the conservation area. Indeed, the impact is so limited the extension has been in place for over 3 years without complaint, with the breach of planning control only highlighted very recently. The applicants acted in good faith in constructing the extension and were not aware that it needed planning permission. They have sought to rectify the breach in planning control as soon as the issue was highlighted to them. For these reasons, I respectfully request members follow officer recommendations and grant planning permission for this development. I'd like to thank members for their time today and their consideration of the points made in this statement.
Thank you very much. I now move the officer recommendation. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Jays. Councillor Simmons.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'm very interested to hear that the agents just said that the extension was built 3 years ago, and that the applicant wasn't aware he needed planning permission. Yet 3 years ago, he had a planning application that was refused for an extension. Yet he went ahead and built an extension that was outside of the planning permission for planning. So I can't begin to support the officer's recommendation on this. The applicant has gone completely against the council guidance. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you. Members, anybody else? Councillor Jays, please.
Thank you. I'm just wondering what were the officer's reasons for refusal 3 years ago and what's massively changed other than the fact he's actually gone ahead and ignored that and built it?
The extension which was refused was, from memory, I think 3.9 metres, quite significantly deeper than the SPG guidance the council applied. This one is of reduced depth, much closer to the limit in the SPG.
Thank you. Councillor Jackson.
Yes, I used to live in the road just parallel to it. I can't see any reason to object to this. I totally agree with what the officer says and what the agent said, and the person who's supporting it has made some very good points. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Marchington.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Much as I think that the material is wrong, it should be stocked as the existing building, but I find that the fact that it's encroached on the boundary by 2.4 metres, that's 9.5 inches. That's a no-no. You can't just build on somebody else's property. And if it was me there, I'd have it walled down, definitely.
Yeah, but that's not a matter for planning. Yeah, that's a private matter.
So I actually disagree with you because you're going to pass it and give them permission to take the ground, and that's what you are doing.
I'm not going to do anything. The committee are going to do it. Councillor Marchington, thank you. Councillor Hunt.
I think there's obviously past history here, because what in the report, I think it is, that the house next door was going to be building their own extension onto it, which is why it's been done in this way. And there was probably some sort of form of agreement in place or something to be able to do that. So I don't think that is anything that we should be considering. But I did have a concern with the look of it, but I know that we've got the condition on there to make sure that it's rendered within 3 months, which I think is doing whatever we can to make sure it does look better in the quickest timescale possible. So yeah, no problem with it.
Thank you. Councillor Perkin.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I'd just like to say that it's always disappointing to see retrospective planning applications come in, especially when there's been previous applications that have been turned down, and the applicant really should have sought advice on this before they put it in.
Thank you. Councillor Stephen.
Yeah, I'd like to know what was there prior to the extension being built. Was there a fence, a wall, and how high was it? Because if you're going to build something where there was an existing fence or wall, there's not much extra height involved in blocking out any light in that window.
I think unless the officer's got a crystal ball.
No, well,
it'd
there's
be
obviously
difficult
not.
to know,
But,
yeah.
But there must have been some form of fencing or something there.
Yeah, boundary
Prior to that,
margin, yeah. Councillor Winkles.
Thank you, Chair. I listened to this debate coming in quite late this time. I echo the concerns of a previous speaker on this. As I understood it, this was turned down 3 years ago or whatever, and they decided to go along and do this against a application that was refused. So why are we saying it's okay now?
Okay, thank you. I think we've been somewhere towards explaining that with the officer earlier, so perhaps you missed that point. Okay, members, I'll take this one to the vote then. Those in favour of the officer recommendation for approval? Those against? Abstentions? Okay, so that's 6 for and 8 against. So now we need a substantial reason from the floor for refusal. Sorry. Sorry, 1 second. Could I just ask you to vote again? Those in favour of the officer recommendation for approval? Right. Don't forget you've got Ben outside. Those against? So that's amends to 6 for it and 9 against. So permission is refused, but we need reason for refusal. Yeah, permission not granted. Yeah, so we'll need a reason for refusal from the floor. Proposal, please.
Sorry, members, if you want to refuse, we do need to have a reason from the floor, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Oh, sorry, that's well.
Sorry,
can I suggest for a start, loss of amenity for the residents of number 9?
Yeah, what aspect in particular?
Well, we've only got to look at the proximity of the wall to the rear window of the property. That it's blocking out all the. It's created a tunnel effect at the back of the property, which, to my eyes, sitting here, looks very unpleasant.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Marchington.
Yes, I think it's inappropriate materials and should be stock bricks the same as the main buildings.
Did we get that? Inappropriate materials. Yeah. Yeah, Mr. Elgar, would you like to comment?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I think this was quite a difficult one. There is these sorts of extensions of unfortunately they've been either sort of built without consent or allowed in various situations. They're not particularly sympathetic to the character of the sort of typical Victorian terrace houses that they relate to, and as can be seen, they can also cause issues with residential amenity. I think it would be hard to sustain a conservation related reason for refusal, given how difficult it is to actually see the structure. It is just possible to see the top of it. And obviously the breeze block material isn't particularly appropriate, but I mean that could be easily addressed by either replacing it or rendering over it, which would lessen the harm, and also rendering it might also improve the light levels to the property. There's concern about light by sort of reflecting the light better than the sort of dull grey kind of breeze blocks would, but certainly in terms of the quality of design, it's quite poor. It's quite strange how the breeze block structure is actually encroached into the neighbour's space. I'm not quite sure why they've done that. The agent did mention about doing that so that the neighbour could build off it if they wanted to do the same, but why it wasn't built to sort of half over the boundary line rather than completely kind of overlapping onto the neighbour's half, I'm not quite sure on that. We didn't get an explanation about that, but the quality of the design is certainly poor, and I think that's something that you could potentially weave into a reason for refusal, possibly interwoven in relation to the the effect on the immunity of the neighbour, because I think that those two issues overlap to some degree. I hope that's helpful, Chair. Thank you.
Yes, very helpful. Thank you. So, members, given what we've been given.
Sorry, members, for your advice, given this is a retrospective application, and if you're minded to refuse, then we need to look at enforcement action.
Yeah, Councillor Jones.
Could the officer put up the previous decision notice from 2019? Because I think some of it must be relevant to this case. I know it's slightly different, but I'm sure some of the policies will apply. It's on the planning portal for all to see.
No, we don't have that decision notice.
It's on the planning portal. I'm sure we've got the internet at this council.
Can you pull it off, Terry?
Chair, I could probably assist with that. Do we have the reference number?
Yes, we certainly do. It's 22.
22.
Sorry.
That's the current one, isn't it?
Yes. Okay. 818/5539/full. So that's 18/505539/full.
Right, just bear me a second. I'll need to share my screen with you, and hopefully you can all see if I just bring it up on the screen. Can you see my screen, Chair?
Yes, we can indeed. Yeah.
Right, let me just. Sorry, clumsy typing. Right. So there's 3 reasons for refusal. Would it help me to read them out, Chair, or can everyone sort of see them clearly enough?
Yeah, could I just say as well at this point, just as a reminder, that it isn't exactly the same application as the one that's in front of us.
If it's helpful, I can bring up the drawings so you can see the differences, if that would be helpful.
Sorry, with all due respect to my colleague, that it was for a different scheme. It's not the same. So I don't believe it will be of benefit for us to bring up drawings.
That's fine. Shall I stop sharing?
Second, Councillor Jays.
Some of it's similar, obviously. We'll ignore the bits about second floor rear extension and the 2 Velux windows, but the extension of a single story, some of that still applies. However, I did vote for this application, so I hope other members that vote against it can come up with reasons for refusal.
Yeah, it's obviously bigger inside. We're talking about 3.9 metres, aren't we? So, 1 second, I've got Councillor Valentine to come and get Councillor Hunt.
No, the point I was made by Councillor Marchington.
Oh,
we could add poor quality of design to the list from what the officer said.
Yeah, okay. Do we make a note of that? Poor quality of design. Councillor Hunt.
I haven't got anything to say that's actually going to help because I think it should have been approved. But,
Really?
The only thing, if you're looking about the bulk, it's 5 centimetres more than our guidance. So you've got to try and weigh up that 5 centimetres. That harm is what you've got to come up with. Just, yeah.
That's why I voted for it. Okay, so can you just refresh me where we are with it in terms of reasons for refusal then, please? Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. I've got noted down that refused on the grounds of a loss of amenity, including loss of light to the residents of number 9, owing to the canyoning effect and the use of, sorry, not the inappropriate materials and the poor quality design. I think that's everything. So yeah, loss of residential amenity and loss of light due to the canyoning effect and the poor quality of design.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Councillor Simmons.
Sorry, Chairman, but I know the conservation officer said he thought that materials were the use of the inappropriate materials in a conservation area wasn't because it was hardly visible from the road. But surely, whether it's visible or not, materials in the whole point of the conservation area is to maintain the character of the conservation area, and just the fact that it's not visible from the road doesn't mean to say that people can use any material they like. And I would have thought that the use of inappropriate materials in a conservation area was relevant to this refusal.
Okay, allow our head of planning.
It's just worth reminding members that development in conservation area must preserve or enhance. It's not both.
Councillor Valentine.
Sorry, isn't the inappropriate use of material an impact on the amenity of the neighbours?
Chair, that's already covered by the proposed reason for refusal on amenity. That would cover the
Specifically about the light and the canyoning effect, wasn't it?
Could we just read it out again, please?
So yeah, so we've got loss of amenity for the residents at number 9, including the loss of light and owing to the canyoning effect and the poor quality of design. So we don't.
Can't we add in inappropriate materials into that reason?
I would be reluctant to say that that's definitely a good thing to do, but you do need to be mindful that reasons for refusal shouldn't be matters that can be dealt with through conditions, and you could use a condition to require, for example, the rendering which has been suggested, and as in the Conservation Officer's view would mitigate that impact.
Okay, but it doesn't make it stock brick, does it? Which is what would have been much more desirable.
Can I just come in again there, Chair? I'm
Yes,
sympathetic to that view, but there is a wide mix of the Victorian properties which have sort of partially or wholly rendered elevations, and I think the one in question is partly rendered. So I think we might struggle to make the argument that it should be facing brickwork. I'm almost certain that we've approved extensions of a similar kind, which have been more perhaps modestly scaled, which have had rendered elevation. So I think we might struggle to make that argument. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So members, we've heard does anybody want to formally propose that as a refusal? Looking at Councillor Simmons.
I'll propose that, Chair.
Can we have a seconder?
I'll second Councillor Winkler's.
Councillor Winkler, thank you. Those in favour? That was those in favour of the refusal reasons, of course, just so you've all got that clear. Are those against? And abstentions, please. So permission is refused, subject to the issue of the decision notice. And now we'll also have to have a look at taking enforcement action. Okay, so we'll bring a report back on that one for committee doing to go on enforcement. Thank you. Right, we'll move on to, we'll tick along now to 2.3 if we can. And this one is 21/506797/ full. And it's Hartlip Barn, Sweepstakes Farm, Low Road, Hartlip. I thank the officer for Yes, that's right. Yeah. Thank you. Apologies. So that's the Hartlip Barn, Sweepstakes Farm, Low Road, Hartlip, Lower Hartlip Road, Hartlip. And I thank you also for an outline and any updates, please.
Sorry, Chairman, I'm set up for the deferred item. Is it possible to do that one first?
Yes, it certainly is. We can do it. Right. So members, we'll go back to deferred item 2, which is 19/503511/ full, and that's Cripps Farm, Plough Road, Minster. And I thank the officer for an outline and update on this one then, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Cripps Farm is in the countryside in Minster on Plough Lane. Members will probably remember that we dealt with an application for a separate development at last planning committee. This is a retrospective application for the boundary wall that has been erected on site. And this was presented to members back in 2020 with a recommendation for refusal. And the committee determines that the application should be deferred so that further consideration can be given to the extent of land at the front of the property that was within the applicant's ownership, and whether there was the opportunity to carry out landscaping to the front of the site. As you can see from the photo, the wall runs along the entire frontage. At this point here, it's 2 meters in height, but as you come down the hill, you'll see that that the wall is actually considerably taller at this end, and the distance from the road to the wall is about 3.5 meters there. The applicant has provided a amended plan here, which demonstrates that they have a small area to the front of the site that they can utilise for landscaping. It's between about 260 mils and 560 mils in depth, and they've shown this area of landscaping here to the wall. In addition, members will see from the report that KCC Highways, whilst they're happy that there was a previous issue relating to the proximity of structures to the highway, whilst that's been resolved, KCC Highways have said that whilst they have no objection, they would seek for any landscaping to be low level to maintain visibility displays. So our recommendation is still to refuse planning permission, and that's on the basis that although an area has been identified to the front of the wall, our view is that that's insufficient and isn't going to lead to any particular screening or softening of the wall, and in addition, obviously KCC Highways want visibility space to be maintained there anyway. I do have an update as well for members of table. They should note that they've got a tabled update with comments from the tree officer. Those comments really essentially back up the main report, where the tree officer has essentially confirmed in their view that you're not going to get any meaningful landscaping to the front of the wall. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I move the officer recommendation. Could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Preece. Councillor Jones, thank you. Members, any comments, any views? Councillor Burt, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Unfortunately, I'm going to go against the officer's recommendation on this one. I think that picture shows that actually if it was kept at that kind of level, it does hide the wall quite a bit as you come up the road compared to what it was previously. When we obviously looked at this before, it wasn't established. It now is becoming established, and personally, I think that's acceptable.
Thank you. Councillor Marchington.
Could you just confirm where is the wall actually built on their property? Is in their inside their boundary line? Because I know there's a dispute between that and the highway. It is actually built on it.
Yes, the wall and the small area to the front of the wall that can contain landscaping is all within the applicant's land and not on the highway.
Okay, thank you.
Members, I don't see anybody else indicating, so I'll take this one to the vote. Those in favour of the officer recommendation to refuse approval? Those against? So that's 12 for and 4 against. So the officer's recommendation for refusal is carried. So permission is refused. Can we now move on to 2.3 then, please, Mr. Byrne? Thank you. I will seek permission. Members, just while Andy's calling that one up, can I ask for your indulgence again for an extension of standing orders for the last time this evening? Thank you, members.
Right, thanks, Chairman. No update for members. Everything is as per the report. Just very briefly, this site is located within the countryside within Hartlip Conservation Area. There's a listed building further to the north, although not directly next to the site. Permission sought for an extended garden to the property, which you can see highlighted in green on the plan on the screen. And that extended area measures approximately 16 metres deep and 33 metres wide. Whilst that would extend into the field to the north, which is all owned by the applicant, officers consider that it wouldn't cause demonstrable harm. It would extend the garden to a similar depth to the immediate neighbouring property, and the proposals include a new landscape boundary, which would accord with our local plan policy DM13, which in itself is a policy explicitly for extensions to gardens in rural areas. The proposal also includes conversion of one bay within an existing 3-bay tractor shed building, which is here, for use as garaging. And the conversion of this building has caused some concern, given that the building was only approved in 2020 for agricultural use. However, when that permission was granted, part of the justification was, in addition to tractor storage and other agricultural storage, it was also proposed to be used for hay storage. The applicants have recently received permission and built this stable block here, which includes a hay store, which they consider is appropriate for that storage, and it frees up a bay within this building. So whilst officers are mindful that that building has only recently been built under essentially the terms of being required for agriculture, in this instance, we consider there's sufficient justification to allow the use of one bay as garaging, and the conservation officer raises no objection to either the extended garden or the conversion of one of the bays to a garage. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I move the officer recommendation. Give a seconder, please. Thank you, Councillor Jays. Members. Councillor Jays.
So I know the parish council isn't here. I just check, I think it's 10:30 at night, but what is the reason it's here? Is it because they've mentioned the word conservation area? I'm only missing it because it's 10:30 at night, otherwise.
Yeah, so obviously the first few points that the parish make relate to the fact that it's retrospective, but the final point is, in their view, that the application is damaging to an ancient landscape and doesn't protect or enhance the conservation area. So those are material planning considerations. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I don't see anybody else indicating. So those in favour of the officer recommendation for approval? That's unanimous, members. Thank you. So permission is granted subject to issue of the decision notice. We now move on to item 2.4, which is 21/502972 full. And this is land southeast of the A299 slip road off the Thanet Way. And again, I thank the officer for an outline. Any updates, please?
Hello, it's Tom Webster again. I'm just trying to get control of the screen if possible. Yeah, hello. Yeah, there doesn't seem to be a way of getting control to share my plans and photos. Can you all hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you okay, Tom. As I say, we just can't see anything on the screen.
Yeah, I'll just see if it's I'll see if I can. Let's see if it shares now. that okay? Is that working?
Yes, it is indeed. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Yeah, okay. Plan permission for 34 general industrial units on this site has already been granted through permission 18/506 384/full. And this application seeks to increase the amount of industrial units by 1 to 35 industrial units. The additional unit can be found in units 1 to 12, so 1 to 11, which previously comprised 2 separate industrial blocks. This additional unit creates an unbroken terrace, which has also been moved by 2 metres towards the western boundary. The commercial uses being applied for are subsection G, B2 and B8, which reflect the uses of the extant consent for 34 units. At the request of the officer, the revised plans have been submitted, which allow for first floor windows on the flank walls at the end of each row to allow for more visual interest. A pond, native hedging and wildflowers will also be provided. In short, I think it is a very modest increase in commercial floor space, which does not significantly alter the extant consent. If anything, along with the proposed layout for the co-joining site for 13 industrial units, which have been dealt separately as a non-material amendment, the proposal represents an improvement as a layout when read as a whole. The 2 sites together will allow for a bigger strategic gap between the blocks of units, and also the greater provision of landscaping is also a benefit. For these reasons, I respectfully request that planning permission be granted. I should add that, before I share the elevation plans, the windows at first floor level, I shall show you some site photos so you can familiarise yourselves with the scheme. I can see construction is underway under the extant consent, and this is a view from the slip road onto the A299. This is a view of the site from the A299. It's very well screened, and really it's only the top part of the elevation and the top of the ridge will be visible to passing traffic. This is a view on the site. This is blocks 1 to 11 and 24 to 35. Sorry, no, 30 to 35. Again, this is showing a site which is kind of, it's they've been designed to have a kind of brick plinth and then there'll be kind of a variety of cladding above, which is some of the previous has asked for on the extant consent and it's been retained here. I should now show you the elevations. Yeah, this is something we asked for on the end treatment to before, because you might get glimpses in the site and around the sites of the edges of the terraced units, and so we thought, yeah, some windows here just makes it a bit more interesting, and the applicants have responded, and yeah, I think it proves the scheme.
Tom, thank you. So members, I move the recommendation. Could I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Jays. Councillor Valentine, it's in your patch, I think.
Thank you. I'm sure we all have some sites, sitting on this committee where we think, oh my goodness, we made a mistake with giving permission with that. And for me, this site is one of those. When you drive down the 299 and I first saw the steelwork going up, I was really shocked at seeing the height of it. I've been back and looked at the plans. The ridge is 8.5 meters. And now the cladding's gone on. Admittedly, you're driving on a dual carriageway and there's a petrol station around, but you are essentially driving in the open countryside and you suddenly have this huge industrial building there. It's particularly visible in winter. It's looking a bit less obstructive now. The trees have got leaves on them, but they're deciduous trees there, and it's very prominent in building. And the gap was put in this building in order to reduce the blocking effect of the building. And And they've just, I mean, we've got a long planning history here, I think, of where we've been bounced into giving that permission that I regret. And they've gone and built, I mean, this is part retrospective. They've already built this, or they've partly built it. And I think they should have respected the planning permission. And I oppose it.
Yes, thank you. I understand that it's got an extant permission on this one.
Yeah, yes, there is. That's what I say. There are a number of different permissions in it, but there was a gap in the block in the planning permission. I thought they were building out, and they've built it without that gap.
Oh, yeah. So, may I just come in there? Would it be helpful to? I've got a plan here which shows a side-by-side analysis of this proposal with the extant consent. I think that'd be quite useful at this point. So, the application site we're looking at tonight, it's units 1 to 11, going down to 35 here. But in practice, it forms part of a wider site. We subdivide into 2 parcels, but it'll read as one site when they're built. And previously, consent was granted for all these units, and the gap here I think was about just under 2 meters. So it's a very small gap, but I do agree. I really realise why it's put in to soften it. But then the gap with the neighbouring site was very small as well, and I think we feel. Yes, I suppose it's fait accompli because the start construction works already. But I think actually, when ultimately there's a bigger gap now between the 2 different terrace rows of different units. And I think that probably, and also a bigger landscaping area here. And I think on balance, we feel collectively this is an improvement on the original permission.
Thank you. Councillor Valentine, you might want to refer to paragraph 2.06, so it is made retrospectively. Councillor Beard?
No, I support the officer's recommendation.
Okay. Councillor Winkless?
I would just like to add, well, I don't particularly like the idea of industrial units in such rural areas, but reading this, I've got to admit that if we was to refuse this, we would probably lose it on appeal. So I've reluctantly got to go along with it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So members, those in favour of the officer recommendation for approval? Those against? And abstentions? One abstention. So permission is granted subject to the issue of the decision notice. Members, we've just got part 5 now. There's 2 items there. Forbes Road, Faversham. Don't know if you want to make any comments. That was one that, for some reason, I thought it came before us as a committee, but it's down to delegated refusal. Perhaps I was wrong. Councillor Simmons.
I think it did come towards you. It did come. It's certainly, certainly over the years, it's been the town council, and has been recommended for refusal. I think the inspector has made the right decision.
Yeah, Councillor Beard.
Mine's on 5.2. I welcome the decision on that, and it again shows that the interim planning policy that we adopted was fundamentally flawed. And to pick up paragraph 16 of the inspector's response, the interim planning policy was not subject to full public consultation, and the consultation that which did take place was largely with regard to a differently worded policy. And we made that point at full council when it was adopted and was told that we was wrong. And Minster Parish Council and several other parish councils also made that point and was told they were wrong. I'm glad the inspector has put the case right. Frankly, I think the interim policy should be repealed.
Okay, thank you. Members, anybody else? Okay, it just remains for me to, I know you're waiting with bated breath. You'll find it's not a Monday, it's a Tuesday, the 9th. We'd like to do the planning working group visit at 10 a.m. if we can. Apologies.
Could I put my apologies in now, please, Chair?
Yeah. Right. Okay, Tim, thank you. Right, thank you all members for your forbearance. I didn't think we'd be here quite this long this evening, but there you go, we are, and we're here to hear everything as best we can. All I do is wish you a safe trip back home, and thank you, officers, and we'll see you all at the next one.